Beneath Vatican City sits a guarded maze of corridors stretching for miles, shelves packed with fragile parchments, sealed letters, trial records, confessions, political secrets, and documents that shape the fate of entire civilizations. For centuries, only the Pope and a select circle of scholars were allowed inside, not because it's full of fantasy, but because it contains real history, and some of that history is deeply disturbing. Let's open the vault. The Knights Templar were secretly declared innocent. Now imagine being tormented into confessing to crimes that you simply didn't commit, then executed anyway, while the document proving your innocence is quietly locked away for 700 years. Well, that's exactly what happened to the leaders of the Knights Templar. Now, back in 1307, King Philip of France ordered the very sudden arrest of hundreds of Templars. They were actually accused of heresy, idol worship, and blasphemous rituals. Now, under brutal torment, many actually confessed. The medieval world was told these warrior monks were secret devil worshippers, and their order was destroyed. Their leaders were actually burned alive. Case closed, or so everyone thought. But inside the Vatican archives, a document known as the Chinon Parchment tells a completely different story. Discovered in the archives in 2001 by researcher Barbara Frail, the parchment records a secret 1308 investigation ordered by Pope Clement. Now, here is the bombshell. The Pope absolved the Templars' leaders of heresy. Now, they were not declared innocent of everything, but they were reconciled with the church. Spiritually forgiven, if you would say. Now, officially cleared of the most serious religious crimes, yet politically, the Pope still dissolved the order under pressure from the French crown. So, while the world believed the Templars passed away condemned as heretics, a document in the Vatican vault showed they had actually been pardoned before their execution. History didn't just get this wrong, it got it backwards. The Vatican archivist who became a criminal. You expect secrets in the archives. You don't expect the archivist himself to become one of them. Now, in the 1940s, a Vatican official named Monsignor Eduardo Pretner Kipoco worked with sensitive materials connected to church administration and archives. But behind the scenes, he was actually running a scheme that sounded kind of more like a spy thriller than a church scandal. So he forged financial documents, he stole valuables that had been entrusted to the church. Jewelry went missing, funds were diverted, important papers were tampered with, and at one point, he even managed to escape custody. His arrest and trial in 1948 became a massive embarrassment. A man with insider access to Vatican records had, taken advantage of his position there for fraud and deception on a huge scale. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is this so chilling? Well, because if someone with that level of access was corrupt, it raises a very unsettling question. What documents did he see, and what might he have copied, altered, or even leaked? I mean, this wasn't medieval mystery. This was actually modern scandal inside the walls of one of the most secretive institutions on earth. The archives don't just hold secrets, they've been part of modern ones too. The La Salette secret that stayed hidden for over a century. 2 children, a mountain in France, a vision of the Virgin Mary that alone would be enough to spark controversy. Now, what made this apparition truly unsettling was what came next. In 1846, 2 children claimed a radiant woman appeared to them and delivered a message. Now, these written secrets were sent to Rome and placed into church custody. They were not widely published. They were not openly discussed. They were stored. For over a century, speculation swirled that they contained messages of the future. Now, the Vatican eventually clarified which versions were considered authentic and which were later embellished. But the fact remains, the original handwritten secrets were preserved in Vatican custody for generations, fueling the idea that, these prophecies might be too scary to actually release to the public. Letters from prisoners begging for their lives. The Vatican archives don't just hold theology, they hold lost words. One of the most haunting categories of documents in the archives is personal correspondence from historical figures facing trial, imprisonment, or execution. Among them are letters from Mary, Queen of Scots. While imprisoned in England, she wrote to Pope Sixtus V, pleading for support and intervention as it loomed. Now, her letters are emotional, they're really deep. The archives also contain records from the trial of Galileo Galilei, who was condemned for supporting, lots of different things. His interrogations, forced, admissions. These are not legends, these are original documents and recordings that these institutions don't want released. Reading them is like standing in a room while history makes a decision you already know will end very badly. The third secret of Fatima and the fear of what wasn't said. Now, in 1917, 3 children in Fatima, Portugal, reported visions of the Virgin Mary who gave gave them 3 secrets. The first 2 were eventually revealed, the third was written down, sealed, and delivered to the Vatican with instructions that it should be opened later. For decades it remained locked away, rumors exploded worldwide, people believed it predicted nuclear war, the end of the church, global catastrophe, but in 2000, the Vatican released a text they said was the full third secret, a symbolic vision involving suffering and, people that would be assassinated in the church. Not everyone was convinced though. Some believe the message was incomplete or that there was more explanation needed. Now, 20th century turned this into one of the most debated religious secrets in modern history, and it shows how a single envelope can make such a big deal. Now, these are real working historical archives, but when you combine them all together, the result is a collection of records that can feel more unsettling than any ghost story, because these aren't legends, they aren't receipts, there actually are just proof from the past that show us a future that we may not be ready to fully see. The Chronovisor. Now, the Chronovisor is an alleged device that purportedly allows users to view past events, so essentially a time machine of sorts. Now, according to some accounts, it was developed in the 1950s by Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk, with assistance from scientists, including Nobel laureate Enrico Fermi. Now, Ernetti claimed to have used the Chronovisor to obtain a photograph of the crucifixion and to witness a performance of the lost play Thyestes in ancient Rome. Now, the claims surrounding the Chronovisor and Ernetti's work have been met with skepticism and controversy. Some evidence suggests the photograph of the crucifixion was a reversed image of a postcard, and doubts have been raised about the authenticity of his transcription of, the Thyestes. Now, the device supposedly used a series of antennas and exotic metals to capture residual electromagnetic radiation left by past events. While the Vatican has never confirmed its existence, rumors persist that the device is hidden within the Vatican's secret archives, deemed too dangerous due to its potential to alter, perceptions of history and challenge established doctrines, which would explain why even the Pope has refused to go near it. The Devil's Bible, which is the Codex Gigas. Now, the Codex Gigas, often referred to as the Devil's Bible, is a massive 13th century manuscript originating from Bohemia. Now, the Codex Gigas is the largest extant medieval illuminated manuscript in the world at a length of 92 centimeters. Its most striking feature is a full-page illustration of the devil, leading to legends that it was created in a single night through a pact with Satan. While the manuscript currently resides in the National Library of Sweden, some believe the Vatican possesses a copy or related texts that are actually kept hidden due to their blasphemous content and the fear that reading them could invoke demonic influences. Researchers estimate that it would actually take one person 5 years, or around, the clockwork, to complete the Codex Gigas, meaning it's more likely that this one scribe spent between 10 to 25 years or 3 hours a day writing and illustrating the manuscript. In the internet age now, the Codex Gigas is now accessible online, allowing people from all around the world to explore its pages. Now, this newfound accessibility has its advantages, aiding researchers and history enthusiasts. Yet, it also raises questions about the risks of spreading its mysterious contents to a wider audience. It's been said that this is one item that the Pope won't touch, even with a pole.
The Shroud of Turin. Our journey begins with an object of immense fascination and debate: the Shroud of Turin. This linen cloth bears the faint image of a man who appears to have suffered crucifixion, a figure many believe to be Jesus Christ. Locked away, rarely displayed, the shroud has undergone countless scientific examinations, yet its origins remain stubbornly elusive. Could this cloth hold definitive proof of the Passion of Christ? Or conversely, could its mysterious nature point to something else entirely? Something the Vatican has meticulously concealed to protect the foundations of its faith. The questions surrounding the shroud are unsettling, and the Vatican's tight control over its study only deepens the intrigue. Jesus does not exist. Our next terrifying secret strikes at the very heart of Christian belief: the alleged hidden knowledge that Jesus does not exist. This is perhaps the most controversial and potentially faith-shattering secret of all. Could historical documents or archaeological findings, locked away in the Vatican's extensive libraries, cast doubt on the historical existence of Jesus Christ as depicted in the Bible? Think about the implications. Nero, the Roman emperor, and Paul, a pivotal figure in early Christianity. Could these letters, if genuine, expose a reality that contradicts the Gospels? The Vatican's unwavering stance on the divinity of Jesus makes any suggestion to the contrary seem unthinkable. Conspiracy theorists believe these letters might reveal a different origin for Christianity, one where the historical Jesus, as we know him, is absent. The Vatican's intense secrecy surrounding its archives only fuels this fire. What truth are they guarding so fiercely? Why the tight-lipped silence about such potentially crucial historical documents? The argument is stark. The Vatican, to maintain its authority and prevent global upheaval, has suppressed any evidence challenging Jesus' existence. The claim that the Vatican hides proof Jesus never existed is a dangerous one, shaking the foundations of faith worldwide. Whether it's a fabrication or a hidden truth within ancient texts, the question remains: what secrets lie locked away, and what would the world do if they were ever revealed? The Papal Tiara of Lucifer. Our next secret takes a darker turn, venturing into the realm of symbolism and hidden meanings. Legend speaks of a powerful and ominous artifact, the Papal Tiara of Lucifer. This is not the official papal tiara worn during ceremonies, but a secret, apocryphal crown said to be hidden deep within the Vatican vaults. According to these unsettling rumors, the tiara is adorned with symbols associated with Lucifer, the fallen angel. Could this be mere folklore, a dark whisper in the shadows? Or does it hint at a hidden, perhaps unintentional connection to darker forces within the highest echelons of the Church? The very suggestion sends shivers down the spine and raises uncomfortable questions about the true nature of power and influence. Evidence of extraterrestrial life. Now, we move from earthly mysteries to cosmic possibilities. Could the Vatican, with its vast archives and historical reach, possess evidence of life beyond our planet? The idea of evidence of extraterrestrial life being secretly held within the Vatican might sound like science fiction, but consider this. The Vatican has its own astronomical observatory, and throughout history has been privy to countless unexplained phenomena. Could encounters with beings from other worlds have been interpreted through a religious lens and subsequently concealed to avoid widespread panic or theological upheaval? The implications are staggering, and the silence from the Vatican on this topic is deafening to those who seek answers among the stars. The chief exorcist of the Vatican performed 100,000 plus exorcisms. Finally, we arrive at a secret that speaks of a constant battle against unseen forces. It is said that the chief exorcist of the Vatican performed over 100,000 exorcisms. This staggering number suggests a level of demonic activity far beyond what is commonly acknowledged. Father Amorth was the Vatican's go-to person when it came to what the Church believes is demonic influence. That's a lot of times someone believed they needed help against something truly scary. Think about it. Over 60,000 prayers, rituals, and blessings to try and help people struggling with something they couldn't explain. While the Catholic Church officially recognizes the existence of demonic possession, the sheer volume of exorcisms reportedly performed by the Vatican's chief exorcist paints a chilling picture. Could this indicate a hidden war being waged in the shadows? A constant struggle against malevolent entities that the public is largely unaware of? The implications are terrifying, suggesting a vulnerability within even the most sacred of places to forces that seek to corrupt and destroy. So there you have it, 5 terrifying secrets hidden within the walls of Vatican City. Each of these secrets, if true, could profoundly alter our understanding of history, faith, and our place in the universe. But remember, the Vatican, like any ancient institution, holds countless stories and mysteries within its walls. Whether these particular rumors hold weight or are simply products of speculation, they serve as a powerful reminder that even in the most sacred places, questions remain, and the pursuit of truth is a journey that never truly ends. Tonight, we delve into places where the sacred has been touched, not by angels, but by something far darker. Our first stop takes us to Kansas City, Missouri, and St. Mary's Episcopal Church. Here, rumors persist of a 19th century priest whose spirit is unable to find peace. This was no ordinary priest. Arriving in a city rife with anti-Catholic sentiment, his own leanings towards Catholic traditions and rumors of scandalous behavior made him a target. Accusations flew, his reputation was dragged through the mud, and ultimately, his life ended abruptly by poison. But his passing was not the end for Father Jardine. Many who have been near St. Mary's late at night report an unsettling feeling of being watched. Strange footsteps echo in the empty building, and the phantom scent of incense fills the air, even when no candles are lit. Some have even claimed to see the shadowy figure of a priest with a flickering candle in the second-story window, a silent sentinel forever bound to the church he served and the controversies that consumed him. Father Jardine's spirit, forever in torment, a chilling reminder that judgment and scandal can leave an indelible mark, even in the most sacred of places.
The Chronovisor. Now, the Chronovisor is an alleged device that purportedly allows users to view past events. So essentially, a time machine of sorts. Now, according to some accounts, it was developed in the 1950s by Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk with assistance from scientists, including Nobel laureate Enrico Fermi. Now, Ernetti claimed to have used the Chronovisor to obtain a photograph of the crucifixion and to witness a performance of the lost play Thyestes in ancient Rome. Now, the claims surrounding the Chronovisor and Ernetti's work have been met with skepticism and controversy. Some evidence suggests the photograph of the crucifixion was a reversed image of a postcard, and doubts have been raised about the authenticity of his transcription of, the Thyestes. Now, the device supposedly used a series of antennas and exotic metals to capture residual electromagnetic radiation left by past events. While the Vatican has never confirmed its existence, rumors persist that the device is hidden within the Vatican's secret archives, deemed too dangerous due to its potential to alter, perceptions of history and challenge established doctrines, which would explain why even the Pope has refused to go near it. The Devil's Bible, which is the Codex Gigas. Now, the Codex Gigas, often referred to as the Devil's Bible, is a massive 13th century manuscript originating from Bohemia. Now, the Codex Gigas is the largest extant medieval illuminated manuscript in the world at a length of 92 centimeters. Its most striking feature is a full-page illustration of the devil, leading to legends that it was created in a single night through a pact with Satan. While the manuscript currently resides in the National Library of Sweden, some believe the Vatican possesses a copy or related texts that are actually kept hidden due to their blasphemous content and the fear that reading them could invoke demonic influences. Researchers estimate that it would actually take one person 5 years or around, the clockwork to complete the Codex Gigas, meaning it's more likely that this one scribe spent between 10 to 25 years or 3 hours a day writing and illustrating the manuscript. In the internet age now, the Codex Gigas is now accessible online, allowing people from all around the world to explore its pages. Now, this newfound accessibility has its advantages, aiding researchers and history enthusiasts. Yet, it also raises questions about the risks of spreading its mysterious contents to a wider audience. It's been said that this is one item that the Pope won't touch, even with a pole. The Spear of Destiny, also known as the Holy Lance or the Spear of Longinus, is believed to be the weapon that pierced the side of Jesus during the crucifixion. Now, over the centuries, it has been associated with immense power, with legends claiming that whoever possesses it holds the fate of the world in their hands. Now, the spear is associated with immense power and just the ability to basically control world events for good or for evil. Throughout history, various figures like Emperor Constantine, Napoleon, and even far worse ones have been fascinated by the spear, seeking to possess it. Now, there are multiple claims to the original spear, with some relics housed in various locations like St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and the Hofburg Treasure House in Vienna. The spear has been a symbol of power, destiny, and religious belief, influencing historical events and shaping narratives. Now, due to its controversial history and the potential for misuse, it's rumored that the Vatican has secured the spear, with the Pope refraining from direct contact to avoid dire consequences associated with its legends. Third Secret of Fatima. Now, the Third Secret of Fatima, revealed in 2000 by the Vatican, describes a vision of persecution and the attack on a bishop dressed in white, interpreted as a prophecy of the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II in 1917. Now, 3 shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal, basically reported visions of the Virgin Mary, who entrusted them with 3 secrets. Now, while the first 2 were revealed early on, the third secret remained undisclosed until the year 2000. However, many believe that the full content of the third secret has never actually been entirely revealed, as it allegedly contains apocalyptic prophecies. Now, the Vatican, along with other interpretations, saw the secret as a warning about, the persecution of Christians and the dangers of war. Now, some interpretations also include the vision of hell, notes on the Fatima website. Now, the Vatican's reluctance to disclose the complete secret has led to a lot of speculation that its contents are so disturbing that even the Pope avoids direct engagement with the original documents. The True Cross relics. Now, relics of the True Cross, or pieces of the cross on which Jesus Christ was crucified, are venerated by many Christian, denominations as objects of devotion. Now, these relics are believed to have been discovered by Saint Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine, during a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Saint Helena reportedly found not only the cross, but also the 3 nails used for the crucifixion. Saint Helena reportedly discovered and donated many other relics of the True Cross, including smaller pieces to the Basilica Santa Croce in Rome. Now, fragments believed to be from the True Cross, the cross upon which Jesus was crucified, are held in various churches worldwide. The Vatican possesses several of these relics. While they are, there are tales of certain fragments being associated with malicious or, basically just ominous events. Now, some stories suggest that specific pieces have been actually locked away due to unexplained occurrences, with the Pope choosing not to handle them directly, just to prevent potential supernatural repercussions. The Grand Grimoire. Now, the Grand Grimoire is a legendary book of black magic said to contain rituals for summoning demons and forging pacts with them. Now, the book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact with them. Now, it also details several spells for winning a lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, making oneself invisible, etc., etc. While its existence remains unverified, some believe that a copy does reside within the Vatican's secret archive. Now, given its content, it's, purported that the Pope and other high-ranking officials avoid any interaction with the text, fearing the spiritual dangers that it poses. The Shroud of Turin. Now, the Shroud of Turin is a linen cloth bearing the image of a man, believed by many to be Jesus Christ, and is considered a significant religious relic by many people. Now, the cloth is actually housed in the Cathedral of San Giovanni Battista in Turin, Italy. Authenticity has been the subject of much debate, though, particularly after radiocarbon dating tests in 1988 indicated a date range of 1260 to 1390 CE. which is much later than the traditionally accepted date of Jesus's, crucifixion. Now, the first recorded instance of the shroud was in 1354 in Liry, France. Now, it was presented to the church by a knight named Geoffrey de Charnay, who claimed it was Jesus's burial shroud. Now, in 1389, the Bishop of Troyes, Pierre d'Arcis, denounced it was a forgery. Now, the shroud was later acquired by the House of Savoy and moved to Turin, Italy in 1578. It is now actually preserved in the royal chapel of the Cathedral of San Giovanni Battista in Turin. While it is, one of the most studied artifacts in human history, its authenticity does remain debated. The Vatican has been very cautious in its handling of the shroud, with popes, often observing it from a distance during public displays, possibly due to its controversial nature and the mysteries surrounding its origin. The Index Liborium Prohibitorium. Now, the Index of Forbidden Books was a list of publications deemed heretical or contrary to morality by the Catholic Church. The early versions of this index began to appear from 1529 to 1571. In the same time frame, in 1557, the English crown aimed to stem the flow of dissent by chartering the Stationers' Company. The right to print was restricted to 2 universities, Oxford and Cambridge, and to the 21 existing printers in the City of London, which had between them maybe 53 printing presses. Now, while the index was officially abolished in 1966, copies and related documents are preserved in the Vatican archives. Some of these texts are considered very dangerous and that they remain under strict lock and key, with the Pope even abstaining from reading them to avoid exposure to potentially corrupting ideas. The Papal Tiara of Lucifer. Now, the phrase Papal Tiara of Lucifer is a symbolic association, not a historical fact. It highlights the association of Lucifer, Satan, with the Papal Tiara, a symbol of the Catholic Church's head of state, the Pope. Now, this phrase suggests a connection between worldly power and religious authority, with the figure of the devil often seen as a symbol of evil and rebellion against God. A legend speaks of a Papal Tiara that was crafted but never actually worn, known as the Tiara of Lucifer. It's said to have been commissioned during a tumultuous period in church history and imbued with symbols considered blasphemous. Now, due to its controversial nature, the tiara was hidden away, with successive popes refusing to even acknowledge its existence, let alone wear it. The vial containing the dried blood of Saint Generis, which liquefies miraculously on certain occasions, is kept in Naples, but the Vatican has its own blood relics with similar phenomena. Now, some of these relics have exhibited unpredictable behavior, leading to concerns about their origins and the forces at play. Due to these uncertainties, the Pope often refrains from direct interaction with such relics.
The very controversial Third Secret of Fatima is believed to be a secret document hidden within the archives. In 1917, 3 folks from Portugal received prophecies, one of which was witnessed by thousands of people. But this supposed suppression of the Third Secret fueled rumors that its contents were regarding a nuclear world-ending event, natural disaster, or worse. The release of the contents of this secret in 2000 didn't do much to quell speculation. So to be specific, the first prediction was a vision of hell. The second was a prediction of the end of the First World Mass Extinction event, and a prediction of the beginning of a worse war, as well as a call to consecrate an entire country that's still doing bad things to this day to the Immaculate Heart of Mary as a way to bring peace. And finally, the third big elusive secret, a vision of the Pope, along with other bishops, priests, religious and lay people, being killed by soldiers. The Church has taken this not as specific prophecy, which has or will come true, but in the words of Pope Benedict XVI, a vision, speaking of dangers and how we might be saved from them. He said it is meant to mobilize the forces of change in the right direction. But still, who knows what other curses those documents are holding? Hidden within the Vatican Palace, a set of opulent apartments are adorned with stunning architecture and are said to have hidden passageways used by the infamous Borgia family. Believed to be the first ever criminal family, they were Italian-Spanish nobles who rose to prominence during the Italian Renaissance. During the reign of Pope Alexander VI, formerly known as Rodrigo Borgia, they were suspected of many crimes, including but not limited to adultery, interfamilial relations, theft, bribery, killings, mostly from the liberal use of arsenic, and worse. Because of their grasping for power, power, they made enemies of the Medici family and the Dominican friar Girolamo Savonarola, among many others. This family stands out in history as being infamously steeped in sin and immorality. Going back to that mention of Alexander VI's reign, it is reported that they hosted a lot of naughty parties in the Vatican Palace, the banquet of chestnuts being considered one of the most disreputable balls of this kind, with reports of 50 courtesans in attendance for the entertainment of the banquet guests. It is alleged that not only was the Pope present, but also two of his offspring, Lucrezia and Cesar, were also there. If you were wondering, the Pope had descendants? While a cardinal, Pope Alexander maintained a long-term illicit relationship with Vanosa de Catene, with whom he had 4 descendants: Giovanni, Cesar, Lucrezia, and Geoffrey. Rodrigo also had offspring with other women, including a daughter with his mistress, Giulia Farnese. Cesar went on to kill Giovanni in hopes of gaining more power within the family, and was successful on that front. Lucrezia was a notorious poisoner. She became famous for her skill at political intrigue and the mysterious deaths and disappearances of her husband. I wouldn't want to mess with whatever evil spirits are still lingering around those old apartments and passageways, since there's probably a reason they aren't used anymore. The most cursed ledger of all time that calls the Vatican archives its home would have to be the record of exorcisms conducted by the Catholic Church. A famous man once said, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist." And in modern-day Vatican City, the devil is considered alive and well. The late Pope John Paul II personally performed 3 exorcisms during his reign, and Pope Benedict XVI expanded the ranks of the Catholic-sponsored exorcists throughout the world. In fact, Father Gabriel Amorth, the Church's chief exorcist, claims to have expelled more than 300 demons a year from the confines of his Vatican office. And there's about 350 exorcists operating on behalf of the Catholic Church in Italy alone. Father Gabriel also teaches bishops how to tell the difference between satanic possession and psychiatric illness, noting that those who suffer from the former seem to be particularly repulsed by the sight of holy water and the cross. So in Catholicism, exorcisms are performed in the name of Jesus Christ, and there's a distinction between major and minor ones. Minor exorcisms are included in some blessings in which priests call sacraments, such as blessed salt. The Catholic rite for formal exorcism, which is the major one, is given in section 11 of the Ritual Romana. The ritual lists guidelines for conducting this, and for determining when a formal one is required. In Catholic practice, the exorcist also has to be an ordained priest, if that wasn't obvious. They recite prayers according to the rubrics of the rite, and make use of religious materials, such as icons, sacramentals, and holy relics. The exorcist invokes God, specifically the name of Jesus Christ, as well as saints of the Church Triumphant and the Archangel Michael to intervene as needed. According to Catholic understanding, several weekly exorcisms over many years are sometimes required to expel a deeply entrenched demon. The Holy Rosary has a very important power, and also holy water, really important here. Going back to Father Amorth, he states that in the year 2000, Pope John Paul II attempted to exorcise a woman, but failed. Father Amorth later witnessed the possessed woman crawling up walls like a spider. Absolutely terrifying. A filed lawsuit claims that during the evil German dictator's reign, the Vatican Bank received at least 200 million Swiss francs from his puppet Utasha regime, money that his followers allegedly looted from groups of people they set out to eliminate. The class action lawsuit, headed up by attorney Keelan Friesen at Minneapolis law firm Zimmerman Reed, involved 2,000 plaintiffs, seeking an accounting of the funds as well as restitution that could go up to like 200 million. The claim also names as yet unidentified Swiss, Austrian, Argentine, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and German banking institutions, where according to the lawyer, some of this plunder might have been routed to help war criminals escape to Argentina. The suit relies on once classified documents from various countries that have been made public over the last couple of years. Well, the last many years, as well as a 1998 US government report that was issued. Some of the report's most damning evidence appears in a 1946 intelligence memo from a US Treasury agent named Emerson Bigelow, who states that the Swiss francs were held in the Vatican for safekeeping. The Vatican has consistently denied allegations of receiving Yahtzee gold, and said its internal review showed no trace of such funds, because you're going to trust the internal review from a bank that actually destroyed their records for 70 years before going public on occasion. One of the reasons the Vatican has been criticized is because it refuses to open its archives. A key figure in helping folks keep this money hidden was Krunoslav Draganovic, a Croatian priest who was the head of the College of San Girolamo in Rome. So men in Croatia who wanted to become priests lived at San Girolamo while studying for ordination, and after the big mass extinction event, the college served as a safe house for the Utashi underground. So it's alleged that Draganovic aided Utashi military and civilian leaders who had been in power in Croatia and committed crimes. Krunoslav's assistance consisted in obtaining false documents and safe passage out of Italy. Experts write that there are are allegations that Chronovisor used his Vatican Bank connections to launder the gold stolen by the Utashi, and that he was paid for his cooperation. By the way, Chronovisor admitted that in 1945 he had personally moved 40 kilos of Utashi gold to Rome, concealed in packing cases. A request made under the Freedom of Information Act resulted in the 1997 release of Bigelow's report. Criminal conduct described in the report led to the institution of a 1999 lawsuit against the Vatican Bank, filed by survivors and descendants of the Utashi. But the lawsuit was dismissed in 2009 under terms of the Sovereign Immunities Act. Although the legal case no longer stands, there's a lot of moral questions around all of this. Ever since allegations concerning the Vatican Bank and the Croatian plunder became public, there's been a lot of requests to the Vatican to allow access to the archival documents, and nothing yet. If there is incriminating information, it should be allowed to come out. Whatever data survived the mid-1940s would be found here, and according to experts following tradition, documents pertaining to that time period could have been made public on March 12th of 2014, which was 75 years after this Pope was in power, but nothing's happened yet. At a 1997 conference on looted Yahtzee gold in London, the Vatican was the only one out of 42 countries that rebuffed all requests for archival access. At a 1998 restitution summit in Washington, it ignored an emotional plea made by U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and stood aside as 44 countries approved an ambitious plan to return icky looted art and property, settle unpaid life insurance claims, and reaffirm the call for open access to that time-era archive. There was some enthusiasm over a 1999 Vatican announcement to allow Jewish historians into archives, but it was short-lived. Access was limited to 5,000 documents that had been hand-picked. All that cursed gold? Still waiting to see the light of day. Finally, Queen Mary, a rallying force for Catholic cause in England, wrote a letter in French to Pope Sixtus V from Fotheringay Castle in Northamptonshire in November of 1586. She professed her allegiance to the Catholic Church of Rome and was going against the falsehoods perpetrated by her enemies in England. Now, this letter was written a few weeks before losing her head for her alleged involvement in the plot to take out Queen Elizabeth I. She claimed that the tribunal that condemned her to death was illegitimate, but her claims couldn't save her life or her head.
In fifth place, we have diamond proof of an SA scandal. Alrighty, can I get a show of hands? What's the first thing you think of when I say priest and scandal in the same sentence? Do those two words have the initials SA? I had a feeling. So those are words that this platform doesn't really like, so pardon me while I try to dodge them, and I apologize in advance for how comical I'm about to sound. This affair kicks off on June 22nd of 2023 when the Society of Jesus of Bolivia acknowledged that it had received from the Vatican a copy of the diary belonging to the late Alfonso Pedrejas, who was a priest accused of taking advantage of dozens of minors. He died of cancer in 2009, so he never faced repercussions for his actions in his lifetime. Primarily known as Father Pica, he was placed in boarding schools for impoverished youth, primarily in Cochabamba in the 1970s. So the diary was turned over to the prosecutors in that same city for that reason, and it was discovered that the late priest kept detailed accounts of the underage horrors he committed in Bolivia. So at one point, according to his diary, he told a colleague about the crimes, only to be advised not to mention it in future confessions. Yeah, the good old ignore it and it'll go away approach. The priest's nephew, Fernando Pedrejas, discovered a printout of the diary in an attic and turned it over to a major newspaper. And in its pages, the priest wrote lines such as, "I hurt so many people, too many." The newspaper publishing excerpts from the diary prompted an outcry in Bolivia and an official Vatican response. Go figure. Pope Francis promised to ensure the full cooperation of the Church to work alongside the government as it investigates the allegations. He also expressed sorrow over the ongoing revelations in the Catholic Church, calling them deplorable. Yeah, okay. And remind me again, what does full cooperation mean? Coming from an institution that covers up more than it discloses, pardon me if I take that with a pound of salt. Bolivian President Luis Arce has called on his country to strengthen controls to prevent foreign priests with, a history of sexual crimes from entering the country. Which, it's fine, and obviously I support that, and, great, but it's hard to find that out when the Church is super skilled at covering things like that up. Priest Jordi Bortomeu, a sex crime investigator from the Vatican, arrived in Bolivia back in May to gather information about prevention efforts being undertaken within the Church to stop these kinds of crimes. Well, that sums it up right there for me, folks. The Church has its own sex crime investigator. It's such a problem that they have a specialist. And before someone feels like fighting me on this, specialty jobs like that only exist because there's a need and a problem. That's not the kind of job that just got created out of midair for kicks. The investigation into Pedrejas joins at least 12 other ongoing judicial probes into allegations of clergy sex crimes in Bolivia. So the Bolivian Episcopal Conference has said, one priest has already received a 10-year sentence for his crimes, while another priest, Milton Murillo, was sent to pretrial detention for 3 months in May. New testimony against Murillo emerged in the wake of the Pendrejas scandal as prosecutors called on survivors to step forward. Okie dokie. Time to move on before I start hissing like a tea kettle, and I swear by the end of today, I'm going to turn into a caricature with like a storm cloud over my head. In fourth place, we have a drastic loss of support. So in Germany, people who are formerly members of a church pay a so-called church tax that helps to finance it in addition to the regular taxes that the rest of the population have to pay. If they register their departure though with local authorities, they don't have to pay it anymore. Granted, there are some exceptions for like low earners, folks who are jobless, retirees, students, and etc. But I'm pretty sure here in North America, all money given is through donation, and you just, stop going on your own terms if you want, but it's more complicated elsewhere. But also feel free to let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, because I'm not a certain expert on Catholicism. Anywho, more than 500,000 people formally left the Catholic Church in Germany last year, which was significantly higher than the previous record. The German Bishops' Conference said specifically that over 522,000 people left the church last year, which is up from around 350,000 in 2021. In comparison, only 1,447 people joined the Catholic Church, which was around the same as the previous year. The departures left the number of Catholic Church members in Germany at nearly 21 million, which is just under a quarter of the population. Now, the Bishops' Conference didn't detail reasons for departures in this annual release of statistics, but many people have turned their backs on the church in recent years, amid fallout from scandal over bad things done by clergy and others. Wow, I'm shocked. In 2018, a church-commissioned report concluded that at least 3,667 people were harmed by clergy in Germany between 1946 and 2014, with more than half the victims being under 13, and nearly a third of that served as altar boys. Various dioceses tasked law firms or others to put together reports on their own past handling of these cases, which has led to massive tensions in the Cologne Archdiocese, where the Archbishop, Cardinal Rainer Maria Wolkai, drew widespread criticism for his handling of a report he commissioned. His offer of resignation has been pending with the Pope for months. Now, an independent report in the Munich Archdiocese, where the late Pope Benedict served as Archbishop from 1997 to 1982, last year faulted the handling of cases by a string of church officials past and present, including the then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger himself. The head of the Central Committee of German Catholics, an influential organization, said she was sad but not surprised at the number of departures last year, and has called for reforms and more thorough investigations. Yeah, good luck with that one. I ain't holding my breath. In third place, we have the Vatican Bank, so formerly known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, the Institute, or the IOR for short. It was founded in June of 1942 by papal decree of Pope Pius XII. So anyone want to guess when they presented their first public operations report? Come on, give it a try. Nope, not anywhere in the 1900s. 2013. Yep, that's what I said. 70 years later, they produced their first annual report. The thing that's supposed to be held every year. Previous to all this, all internal ledgers were destroyed every 10 years in accordance with their policy. So the IOR's role is to safeguard and administer property intended for works of religion or charity. And the bank accepts deposits only from top church officials and entities, and is run by a president, but overseen by 5 cardinals who report directly to the Vatican and the Vatican Secretary of State. So they only report to themselves. For reference, all banks that operate here in Canada have to report to the Minister of Finance. Just saying. Former bank president Ettore Tedeschi and the Vatican Bank have been investigated on 2 separate occasions for money laundering. In March of 2012, JP Morgan Chase closed a Vatican account in Milan after the IOR was unable to respond to questionable money transfers. In 2010, Italian authorities seized $30 million from a Vatican account at Italy's Credito Artigiano Spa, following allegations that the IOR violated anti-money laundering laws. Now, everybody denied wrongdoing, and no charges were ever filed. The money was released after the IOR promised to pass measures to come into full compliance with international standards on money laundering and terrorism financing. In September 2019, German Cardinal Reinhard Marx, who was in charge of the Vatican's Economic Council, confirmed that Pope Francis had instructed him to reduce costs in an effort to eliminate a deficit that is estimated to be around 70 million euros. Don't get excited though, that's not a concrete number from them because, that would be way too transparent. The exact amount is up for debate because the Vatican had not published a budget since 2015 and has been without an in-house auditor for 2 years or more. And pardon me while I'm gonna blink real slowly here. The Vatican enjoys a property tax break for all non-commercial properties containing a chapel. So, using this loophole, between the years 2006 to 2011, the Vatican evaded taxes that amounted to 4 billion euros. The European Court of Justice ruled this illegal, and the Vatican had to cough up those euros as tax. Because, every kind of organization has that money lying around. And no, the Vatican did not entirely pay for evading taxes. It is argued that if you take into account the taxes that they evaded dating back to, let's say 1992, they would owe over 13 billion euros. Yeah, I'm moving on before my eye twitch gets worse. In second place, we have the Chronovisor. No, this isn't some weird, hat or goggles. Italian Benedictine monk Pellegrino Ernetti claimed to have used a time viewer which could film the past without sound, and used it to obtain a photograph of the crucifixion of Jesus and view scenes from ancient Rome, including a performance of a very lost play. Now, this was mostly scrubbed away in history until like 2002, when author Father Francois Brune swore in his book Le Nouveau Mystère du Vatican that the Chronovisor not only exists, but he learned about it in the early 1960s. A day after he met scientist priest Father Pellegrino for the first time, the two were sailing along the Grand Canal of Venice discussing biblical interpretations when the father explained that theories and interpretations were unnecessary when one could see the truth for himself. So he explained to our lovely author how the Chronovisor functioned, allowing the viewer to both see and hear events of the past and future. And hey, if you don't believe my word, his full account is in that book I mentioned earlier. So with a little digging, researchers will find first mentions of the Chronovisor in a 1972 article published in the Italian magazine La Domenica del Corriere entitled A Machine That Photographs the Past Has Finally Been Invented. Belongs to the Vatican, and this Chronovisor time machine is heralded as one of the papacy's best kept secrets. It's said to be replete with 3 precious alloys, cathodes, dials, levers, and has the ability to display myriad historic events in biblical and Roman history. So apparently, since it acts as some sort of television, it can verify all of this. Now, this time machine is claimed to have been invented in the 1950s by a dedicated and secret team of Italian scientists, including who I've already mentioned, Mr. Pellegrino himself. Critics may take credibility issues with the fact that he, eventually became a priest, but he was a scientist first. See, this critic doesn't take issue with that, more so that the Vatican is hiding a tool that could be used to help solve, unanswered crimes around the world and maybe help people. Like, imagine how many killings could be solved and how many families of lost people could have answers. Stop being selfish. In first place, we have the allegations from Arise Church. So an external review of Arise Church has called for its entire board to resign after reports from more than 500 current and former members, that include allegations of cult-like behavior, racism, SA, and conversion therapy came to light. So that report, compiled by a group called Pathfinding, which is, a consultancy firm for charitable organizations, was leaked to journalist David Ferrier, who revealed pretty damning allegations. The report was filled with experiences of, like I said, so many people involved with the church, which received nearly 15 million in donations the year before it was released. A 34-page summary of the investigation concluded it was undeniable that there had been significant hurts caused to people involved with Arise and egregious and systemic failures in governance over many years. And called for the board members to get the heck out. Arise Church senior pastor John Cameron did resign from his role following all these allegations, and Brent Cameron, pastor and brother of John, also resigned from his position around the same time. In a statement on its website, Arise said it was committed to safely share the stories of those who had participated and the report had been illegally obtained. Sure, whatever you say. The Pathfinding report recommended a full independent review of the church's finances, including, how donations tagged for certain purposes are used in reality, and a review of policies around expenditure limits for senior leadership. It also recommended disallowing tithing by younglings, and for those who are unaware, it means giving a percentage of your earnings. There was pressure to donate money, and some felt pretty uncomfortable about comments made about their donations. And oh no, I wish I could swear right now. Underage people should not have to give a percentage of their earnings to anything if they're working. In total, 545 people completed submissions for the review, including folks from every campus across the country, past and present ministry school students, current and former members, staff, and past board members. They revealed harmful practices that had continued up until present day, and a very significant number of people had experiences that caused pain and hurt. A review found racist remarks were said from those preaching on the stage, with some staff being told to focus on white kids. When troubling behavior was experienced by members, they felt unable to speak up due to the pressure to say yes and please senior leaders amid an honor culture that had a strong focus on leadership rather than Jesus. This culture created favoritism among members, and leaders sometimes used derogatory nicknames over a period of months for some individuals. So the reviewers heard from people who were pressured to continue working despite illness or serious injuries, including broken bones and concussions, and the dangers people faced driving through the night on no sleep to meet expectations, and operating heavy machinery after 17 hours of duty. Reviewers Viewers heard reports of people at the church who were part of the LGBTQI+ community being subjected to conversion therapy and denied opportunities to serve because of their sin. And when I tell y'all I almost burst into tears when I first read that, as an openly bisexual woman, in today's day and age, I just want to scream whenever someone claims sexuality other than heteronormativity is an abomination or a choice that can be changed. People are born this way and that's their lives. Let them be. It's not going to hurt your existence. Arise Church has reported a loss of almost 2.8 million, and after all of the above came out last year, I couldn't be happier. The average number of people at physical Sunday services fell from 4,000 people to under 3,000, and virtual services were attended by an average of 700 people, down from over 1,000. Numbers also fell across the church's programs for children, which went down 28%, and young people, which was down 62%.
Kicking off this list in 5th place, we have the possibility of proof of alien life. In 1998, news reports emerged that strange, elongated, distinctly alien-looking skulls had been found during a restoration of the Vatican Library, with many suggesting that the Vatican secret archives must be hiding evidence of extraterrestrials. Perhaps an understanding between the Vatican and extraterrestrials is too far out there, too convenient to contemplate. Except the Vatican itself does not run from ties to aliens. Consider the words of Cardinal Conrado Balducci, a high-ranking Vatican official since the 1960s and close friend to many popes, who in 1998 instructed followers to remember a paragraph of the New Testament where St. Paul refers to Christ as King of the universe, not only as King of the world. That means that all beings in the universe, including aliens, are reconcilable with God. Heck, the current pope has said he would baptize an alien, so I guess that's progress for the church? You tell me. In 4th place, we have Conscience Court. Yep, the Vatican has a secret court for sins based on conscience. Not proof, not evidence, but absolution from conscience. Bishops who handle such hearings are the Apostolic Penitentiary, also known as the Tribunal of Conscience. Created by Pope Alexander in 1179, it was a secret to the public until 2009. Wow, a secret they kept from the general public? Consider me less than surprised. The sins judged in this court vary from spitting out the desecration of a communion wafer to priests breaking their vows of celibacy. Spitting out communion's a sin? News to me. I can think of a lot of icky priests that should go to real court for how they broke their vows, not a court where they're simply forgiven. Sinners who seek absolution have to write a petition to the Holy See. They use pseudonyms to protect their identities and submit the petition to the tribunal. The tribunal considers the matter, but the decision-making lies with the major penitentiary, and if he is uncertain, then he submits the matter to the Pope. Until about the 18th century, heinous crimes such as ending lives and fornication against will were judged by the tribunal. Sure, let's give Father whatever his name is a slap on the wrist so he can have a clear conscience about breaking serious laws and go back to his biggest concern about having a perfect life after passing. Because that's the priority for serious crimes. Same with using a fake name for protection. Really great. In 3rd place, time to talk about exorcisms. While I'm sure someone out there is chuckling, exorcisms are nothing to be taken lightly. They're a religious or a spiritual practice of evicting demons, jinns, or other malevolent spiritual entities from a person or an area that is believed to be possessed. It varies a bit from religion to religion, so bear with me while I specify how it works in the Catholic Church. In Catholicism, exorcisms are performed in the name of Jesus Christ. There's a distinction between major exorcisms and minor exorcisms. Minor exorcisms are included in some blessings in which priests create sacramentals such as blessed salt. A related practice is deliverance ministry. Now, the distinction between deliverance ministry and exorcism is that exorcism is conducted by priests who are given special permission from the Catholic Church, while deliverance ministry is prayer for people who are distressed and wish to heal emotional wounds, including those purposefully caused by evil spirits. The Catholic rite for a formal exorcism, called a major exorcism, is given in section 11 of Ritual Romanum. The ritual lists guidelines for conducting an exorcism and for determining when a formal exorcism is required. Priests are instructed to carefully determine that the nature of the condition is not actually a psychological or physical illness before proceeding. Sure, I'd love to see their criteria. In Catholic practice, the person performing the exorcism, known as an exorcist, must be an ordained priest. The exorcist recites prayers according to the rubrics of the rite and makes use of religious materials such as icons, sacramentals, and holy relics. The exorcist revokes God, specifically the name of Jesus Christ, as well as saints of the Church Triumphant and the Archangel Michael to intervene with the exorcism. According to Catholic understanding, several weekly exorcisms over many years are sometimes required to expel a deeply entrenched demon. St. Michael's prayer against Satan and the rebellious angels, attributed to Pope Leo, is considered the strongest prayer of the Catholic Church against cases of diabolical possession. The Holy Rosary also has an exorcistic and intercessory power. Cool, maybe I'll go get my rosary one of these days. Holy water is a common aid for exorcism. Its use belongs to the prayer to St. Michael. The chief exorcist of the Vatican, Father Gabriel Amorth, stated that he had performed tens of thousands of exorcisms over his 60+ years as a priest. Oh my gosh. Additionally, popes have performed exorcisms. Father Amorth states that in 2009, Pope Benedict slammed Satan out of 2 guys, and in 2000, Pope John Paul II attempted to exorcise a woman, but failed to do so. Father Amorth later witnessed the possessed woman crawling up the walls like a spider. Interesting. In Roman Catholicism, exorcism is a sacramental but not a sacrament, unlike baptism, confession, First Communion. Unlike a sacrament, exorcism's integrity and efficiency do not depend on the rigid use of an unchanging formula or the ordered sequence of prescribed actions. Its efficiency depends on 2 elements: authorization from valid and illicit church authorities, and the faith of the exorcist. Ever since the rise of the popularity of exorcisms in the movie of, similar name, the church has tried hiding that they still practice them, but we know better. Number 2 on our list is the Vatican Bank. Yeah, totally not suspicious at all. Buckle in because there is a lot to unpack here. Formerly known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, the Institute, or the IOR for short, was founded in June 1942 by papal decree of Pope Pius XII. Guess when they presented their first public operations report? Nope, not 1943. Try again, I'll wait. Nope, not even in the 1900s. 2013. Yeah, you heard me correctly. 70 freaking years later, they produced their first annual report. The thing that's supposed to be presented every year so no one does anything shady or illegal. Previous to this, all internal ledgers were destroyed every 10 years in accordance with their policy. So did they exist or not? The IOR's role is to safeguard and administer property intended for works of religion or charity. The bank accepts deposits only from top church officials and entities, and is run by a president but overseen by 5 cardinals who report directly to the Vatican and the Vatican Secretary of State. So they only report to themselves. For reference, all banks that operate in Canada have to report to the Minister of Finance. Former bank president Ettore Tedeschi and the Vatican Bank have been investigated on 2 separate occasions for money laundering. Yeah, nobody saw that coming. In March of 2012, JP Morgan Chase closed a Vatican account in Milan after the IOR was unable to respond to questionable money transfers. In 2010, Italian authorities seized 30 million from a Vatican account at Italy's Credito Artigiano Spa following allegations that the IOR violated anti-money laundering laws. Ettore and the bank were both denied wrongdoing, and no charges were ever filed. The money was released after IOR promised to pass measures to come into full compliance with international standards on money laundering and terrorism financing. Yeah, those measures, as of 2023, still have not been passed. In September of 2019, German Cardinal Reinhard Marx, who was in charge of the Vatican's Economic Council, confirmed that Pope Francis had instructed him to reduce costs in an effort to eliminate a deficit that is estimated to be around 70 million euros. Don't get excited. That's not a concrete number from them, because that would be, too transparent. The exact amount is up for debate because the Vatican has not published a budget since 2015 and has been without an in-house auditor for 2 years. Pardon me while I slowly blink here. The Vatican enjoys a property tax break for all non-commercial properties containing a chapel. So using this loophole between the years 2006 and 2011, the Vatican evaded taxes that amounted to about 4 billion euros. The European Court of Justice ruled this illegal, and the Vatican had to cough up 4 billion euros as post-dated tax. Sure, because every normal organization has that kind of money just lying around. The Vatican did not entirely pay for evading taxes, and it's argued that if you take into account the taxes they evaded dating back to 1992, the total amount's going to be over 13 billion euros. That's right, billion. On the 28th of June in 2013, 3 people were arrested by the Italian police on suspicion of corruption and fraud, having planned to smuggle 20 million in cash from Switzerland into Italy. One of those people arrested was Monsignor Nunzio Scarano, previously senior accountant at APSA, the Vatican's administration of the Patrimony of the Apostolic See. Try saying that 5 times fast. In January of 2014, he was further charged with money laundering through IOR accounts in yet another investigation. I'm seeing a pattern here. Are you? According to a police statement, millions of euros in false donations from offshore companies had moved through his accounts. Already in July of 2013, the IOR had frozen the money in his accounts. In July of 2016, Nunzio was acquitted of allegations of corruption, but was given a 2-year sentence after being convicted of lesser charges of making false allegations. His money laundering trial in his hometown of Salerno was still pending at this time. The other person arrested was a bank person and a former Secret Service agent. In February of 2017, a court in Rome convicted 2 former top Vatican bank officials, Paolo Cipriani and Massimo Tullioff, for omissions in communications involving 3 small transfers. Paolo was a former Vatican bank director, and Massimo was his former deputy. They were, however, acquitted of a more serious money laundering charge, which involved 60 million in transfers, and were sentenced to 4 months and 10 days in prison. They were also forced to return $6,000 each. Oh, So glad they had to return so much of that money. In 2018, Vatican prosecutors indicted former Vatican Bank president Angelo Caloia and an attorney, Gabriele Liuzzo, for embezzling $62 million and using a real estate scam between 2001 and 2006. Oh yeah, totally a safe bank to put money in. And in first place, we have some unethical history German stuff. Thanks to guidelines, I have a lovely dictionary of words I cannot say, so I'll try to give y'all a little list right now. Yahtzee's gonna represent a group that carries about, a very distinct flag, and evil dictator Schmiedler is their leader. But I'll just use evil dictator or cruel dictator. I hope y'all can follow along, because things are about to get dicey. Remember that bank I just talked about? Yeah, time to get even more in depth. A filed lawsuit claims that during the dictator's reign, the Vatican Bank received at least 200 million Swiss francs from his puppet Utasha regime, money that his followers allegedly looted from groups of people they set out to eliminate. The class action suit, headed up by attorney Keelan Friesen at Minneapolis law firm Zimmerman Reed, involves 2,000 plaintiffs who are seeking an accounting of purported funds as well as restitution that can amount to around $200 million. The claim also names, unidentified Swiss, Austrian, Argentine, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and German banking institutions, where plaintiffs' lawyers say some of the plunder may have been routed to help the war criminals escape to Argentina. The suit relies on once classified documents from various countries that have been made public in recent years, as well as a 1998 U.S. government report issued by Commerce Undersecretary Stuart Eisenstadt. Some of the report's most damning evidence appears in a 1946 intelligence memo from a U.S. Treasury agent named Emerson Bigelow, who states that the Swiss francs were held in, you guessed it, the Vatican for safekeeping. The Vatican has constantly denied allegations of receiving Yahtzee gold and said in its internal review that they showed no trace of such funds. Sure, I'm totally gonna trust the internal review from a bank that destroyed their records for 70 years before going public. One of the reasons the Vatican has been criticized is that it refuses to open its archives as others have done. A key figure in helping the Utashi was Krunoslav Draganovic, a Croatian priest who was head of the College of San Girolamo in Rome. Men from Croatia who wanted to become priests lived at San Girolamo while studying for ordination. After World War II, the college served as a safe house for the Utashi underground. It is alleged that Draganovic had aided the military and civilian leaders who had been in power in Croatia and committed war crimes. His assistance consisted in obtaining false documents and safe passage out of Italy. People write that there are allegations that he used his Vatican Bank connections to launder gold stolen by, you guessed it, and that he was paid for his cooperation. He admitted in a 1945 that he had personally moved 40 kilos of Utashi gold to Rome, concealed in 2 packing cases. A request made under the Freedom of Information Act resulted in the 1997 release of Bigelow's report. Criminal conduct described in the report led to the institution of a 1999 lawsuit against the Vatican Bank. Criminal conduct described in the report led to the institution of a 1999 lawsuit against the Vatican Bank filed by survivors and descendants. The lawsuit was dismissed in 2009 under terms of the Sovereign Immunities Act. Although the legal case no longer stands, moral questions surrounding the plunder remain. Yeah, I've got a few questions of my own. Now, ever since allegations concerning the Vatican Bank and the Croatian plunder became public, requests have been made to the Vatican to allow access to archival documents from the time of Pope Pius. Pius was Pope from 1939 until 58, and if there's anything, it would be found on documents from his papacy if they still exist. According to Gerald Posner in God's Bankers, following tradition, documents relevant to Pope Pius could have been made public on March 12th of 2014, 75 years after his election as Pope, but you guessed it, the date passed without any release of those documents. At a 1997 conference on looted Yahtzee gold in London, the Vatican was the only one of 42 countries that rebuffed all requests for archival access. At a 1998 restitution summit in Washington, it ignored an emotional plea by U.S. Secretary of State and stood aside as 44 countries approved an ambitious plan to return, icky looted art and property, settle unpaid life insurance claims, and reaffirm the call for open access to that time era archives. Subsequent pleas for opening the files by Bill Clinton, the State Department, and other organizations went unanswered. Enthusiasm over a 1999 Vatican announcement to allow Jewish historians into the wartime archives was short-lived. Access was limited to 5,000 documents that had been selected and published years earlier by 4 hand-picked academics. When our reports of a weeping statue fake news? How credible is the claim that a holy relic led to a miraculous healing? And how should a divine apparition be confirmed? Well, these are the themes addressed in the Vatican's new guidelines on supernatural phenomena, which urge the Catholic Church to take a more cautious approach towards things. This new document, compiled by the Vatican's Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, lays out stricter rules to assess the truthfulness of such claims. The new guidance was presented at a media briefing on Friday and replaces rulings last set out in 1978. Yeah, you heard me right, it's been a whopping 46 years since the Vatican had something to say publicly around rules about things that can't be explained with science. The document recommends incidents of phenomena. They should be maybe carefully assessed, making sure that they're not a fraud, they're not a money-making attempt. This new document warns against creating damage to the unity of the Church and serious errors that could cause scandals and undermine the credibility of the Church. Reports of such phenomena are said to have soared in recent years in this new era of social media, and often spread through disinformation and rumor. So these new guidelines say that as a rule, bishops should issue a nihil obstat, or no obstacle in such cases. So what does that mean? The incident would not be formally recognized as supernatural, but there would be no barrier to worship. The document goes on to say that 5 other decisions can also be issued by bishops, including rejecting the event as supernatural altogether, or even banning the worship of some new phenomena. So under these rules, to be a little more clear, Vatican approval should always be sought by bishops before any conclusions are published, with the Pope able to intervene in exceptional cases. If we're talking about Catholic apparitions, these have been reported for centuries. Ones that are recognized by the Church have prompted pilgrims and popes to visit spots where they are said to have taken place, causing a lot of hubbub. Think about it, you've got millions of folks who flock to France every year. Then you've also got like Fatima in Portugal. That's where the Virgin Mary is alleged to have appeared, promising a miracle. And then, the crowd saw the sun zigzagging through the sky, allegedly. Like, that was officially recognized by the Church back in 1930. It's a known visiting spot. But then there's some recent reports that are kind of more baloney. In 2016, there was an Italian woman that was claiming all these apparitions, which we'll get more on in a minute. Crowds were praying before the statue, and they were getting these awful messages about stuff that really isn't true, bad warnings, really out there, and it took 8 years for the local bishop to debunk the story. Yeah, that trend wasn't mentioned in the new guidance. We might as well talk about it a bit more because it's a heck of a doozy. So this woman's name was Gisella Cardia, and she claimed to be seeing visions of the Virgin Mary in the central Italian town of Trevignano Romano, which is about 30 miles north of Rome, after bringing a statue of Mary with her from a trip to Bosnia, and the statue began to shed tears. So, Bishop Marco Salvi of Civita Castellana, the diocese that includes the area, he's like, I've established a commission of experts in theology, law, and psychology. We're gonna investigate this. Now, eventually the results were published, decreeing a constat de non supernaturalite. So, in English, ixnay on the supernatural. None of this happened, none of these messages that were saying really awful stuff were being spewed, and most of all, this statue was not weeping. Well, if we're talking about claims that are true, pressure was growing on the Vatican to shed light on whether it was aware of a UFO being retrieved from Italy back in the 1930s. Why? Well, there was a lot of claims coming out about the US government's knowledge and handling of contact with alien life. Where do these claims come from? David Grush, the US Air Force veteran who has talked a lot about this. He used to work with the NRO, and in an interview, he mentioned that there was a UFO, or UAP, that was recovered from Magenta, which is a town near Milan, back in 1933, before becoming a US possession with the help of the Papal State. This lovely whistleblower was among 3 people to recently testify to the House Oversight Committee on these allegations, and he repeated that claim that federal government's been aware for a very long time, almost 100 years. Alrighty, here's a doozy. Have y'all heard about the Chronovisor? No, this isn't some kind of weird hat or goggles. This is a story from an Italian Benedictine monk, Pellegrino Ernetti, who claimed to have used a time viewer which could film the past without sound, and used it to obtain a photograph of the crucifixion of Jesus and view scenes from ancient Rome, including a performance of a very lost play. Now, this was mostly scrubbed away in history until about 2002, when author Father François Brun swore in his book, Le Nouveau Mystère du Vatican, or The New Mysteries of the Vatican, that the Chronovisor not only exists, he learned about it in the early 1960s. A day after he met Father Ernetti for the first time, the two were sailing along the Grand Canal of Venice, discussing biblical interpretations, when Ernetti was like, Theories and interpretations are unnecessary when you can see the truth for yourself. So he explained how the Chronovisor functioned, allowing a viewer to see and hear events of past and future. And if you don't believe my word, the full account is in the book. With a little digging, research will find first mentions of the Chronovisor in a 1972 article published in the Italian magazine La Domenica del Corriere, entitled "A Machine That Photographs the Past Has Finally Been Invented." And this time machine has kind of been discussed as one of the papacy's best kept or worst kept secrets. Like, it's got all these precious alloys, all these little dials, levers, and yeah, it's got the ability to display a lot of historical events in biblical and in Roman history. So it acts as like kind of a television. Kinda neat though when you think about it. Yes, a lot of folks did take credibility issues with the fact that Ernetti did eventually become a priest and wasn't just a scientist, but like, he used it for his own purposes. Alrighty folks, and to end today off, it's time to travel back a simple 13 years to visit the Vatican, and it's not to do with the Chronovisor. So, was Rome visited by some unidentified flying objects in recent time? Well, definitely. And the sightings in the skies over the Vatican City stirred a lot of headlines and a lot of TV news reports in Italy. So according to reports, it seemed like a UFO flap was taking place in Rome, and the strange objects were also recorded on camera several times. The most important one is the footage of an odd luminous formation taken by not one, not two, but 3 security guards stationed in front of the residence of the US ambassador to the Vatican. These were qualified witnesses since they're artillerymen. They're trained experts in air surveillance. It was at 4 a.m. on the night of June 7th when 3 men belonging to the 17th degree anti-aircraft regiment at the Santa Barbara station spotted 3 spherical bright objects hovering in the sky above St. Peter's Dome, which is in the Vatican, like right in the center of Rome, and they filmed the unexpected nocturnal air show with a cell phone. From their point of observation in the Roman Monteverde area, they immediately stopped a police patrol. Now, these guys were well trained in spotting aircrafts, and they were like, this isn't like a commercial plane, this isn't a jet fighter, it's not a balloon, it's wild. They were describing the object's swift maneuvers, mentioning a darting move towards the sky, a delta formation, and a luminous dot suspended at about 300 feet above the ground. They added, there is no way a conventional airplane can do such things. This UFO disappeared and reappeared for a couple of brief moments, with sudden changes of altitude before it darted westbound at a 40-degree angle. Now, the police patrol did take the report very seriously, and the central police station in Rome was immediately alerted. Now, the footage, more than a minute in length, was acquired by the Italian police, pending further investigations. Thanks to the technical background of the witnesses, a lot of TV networks also took the news seriously. There was an anchorwoman for Studio Aperto who introduced the segment on the news saying like, we're gonna show you now an exclusive video of a UFO sighting. This was taken by soldiers. They took this very seriously. There was another journalist, Paolo Capresi, that described it very interestingly, like there are 3 flying objects, they're floating in the air, they're filmed in the sky above Rome. And went on and on about like who took it, where, like people took this very seriously. Like, if you're looking at the footage, there was nothing else in the sky that could be a reference point to give the exact distance and shape of the UFOs. They're spherical. They hover above the Vatican. You can see them appearing and disappearing and changing altitude. Maybe all the UFOs just wanted to say goodbye to the Pope?
The tomb in the desert. This is the Nag Hammadi. Now, this is in 1945. A farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging near the Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi when his blade hit something hard on a sealed clay jar, nearly a meter tall. Fearing it might contain a jinn, a spirit, he hesitated. The curiosity won. He cracked it open. Inside were 13 leather-bound papyrus books, written in Coptic, wrapped in linen, and buried deep under rock and sand. He had no idea what he was holding. One of the most, it was so explosive. It was one of the most archaeological discoveries in Christian history, a hidden library of lost gospels that the early church had tried to erase. Now, when scholars finally studied the text, they were stunned. These weren't copies of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. They were alternate versions of early Christianity, long suppressed and labeled hearsay. I mean, inside the jar were more like 50 texts, including the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Philip, the Secret Book of John, the Apocalypse of Peter, and the Gospel of Truth. These writings told a very different story of Jesus, one where salvation didn't come through blind faith or church, authority, but through inner awakening, through knowing the divine spark hidden within each person. But the church of the 4th century saw this as dangerous. Bishop Athanasius and Alexandria declared which books were true scripture and ordered the destruction of anything that contradicted official doctrine. Now, Gnostic Christians who refused to conform were branded red-handed heretics. Now, many were unalived and their writings were systemically kind of destroyed. So how did these survive? Well, the theory is that, these Gnostic monks, realizing persecution was coming, gathered their sacred books and buried them in the desert to protect them from being burned. For nearly 16 centuries, they lay hidden, waiting. When the Nag Hammadi library was finally unearthed, it exposed a Christianity that could have been one based on personal enlightenment rather than obedience. Now, one where women played vital spiritual roles, where the divine had both masculine and feminine aspects, and where the knowledge of God was a birthright, not a privilege of priests. It wasn't just history being uncovered, it was the church's buried fear of knowledge, fear of questions, fear of a truth they couldn't control. The fallen angels and the giants, this is the Book of Enoch. Now imagine a book that tells of angels descending to earth and giving humanity forbidden knowledge that unleashes chaos upon the world. That book existed. It's called the Book of Enoch, and it was once considered sacred. Today, it's missing from nearly every Bible on earth. The Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish text dating back over 2,000 years, written long before Christ, but cherished by early Christian communities. It tells the story of the Watchers, angels who defied God and descended to earth. They taught humans the secrets of weapon making, sorcery, astrology, and beauty. In return, they demanded love and lust, and their children, born of angel and human blood, became giants, monstrous beings called the Nephilim. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Their violence basically filled the earth until God, furious at the corruption of his creation, unleashed the great flood to wipe them away. The Book of Jude even quotes Enoch directly, but as church leaders began deciding which texts would form the official Bible, the book, was quietly excluded. It spoke too much of angelic rebellion, too much of cosmic forces beyond their control. It also contained concepts that threatened to blur the lines between divine and human, heaven and earth, and perhaps most dangerously, it suggested that knowledge itself was the great forbidden fruit, that God's anger came not from sin, but from enlightenment. Now, over time, the church declared this book heretical. It vanished from the West completely. Only in Ethiopia, deep within the Orthodox Tewahedo tradition, was it preserved, translated into the ancient language, and kept as part of their sacred canon. Now, for centuries, Western Christianity forgot, it ever existed. Then in the 18th century, explorers rediscovered copies of it in Ethiopia, and suddenly, the lost tale of the fallen angels returned to haunt theology once again. The church tried to bury it, but the story of the Watchers still rises, a chilling reminder of a God who feared what humans might learn. The Philosopher's Threat Against the Christians by Porfrey of Tyre. Now picture the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. Philosophy rules the school, pagan temples still stand, and a single religion, Christianity, is growing fast, converting peasants and nobles alike. Now, into this moment steps Porfrey of Tyre, a brilliant philosopher, scholar, and student of Plotinus. Now, he believed in logic, reason, and the pursuit of truth through the mind. But as Christianity spread, basically Porfrey grew alarmed at how faith was replacing philosophy, how superstition was replacing inquiry. So he wrote a book, 15 volumes long. He titled it Against the Christians. It was sharp, reasoned, and devastating, and it dissected contradictions in scripture. He questioned the divinity of Jesus. He compared Christian miracles to pagan myths. He argued that the Bible's prophecies were not divine at all, but retroactive stories written to seem predictive. He accused Christians of taking myths too literally, of twisting everything into doctrine. In short, he basically treated Christianity like philosophy, and by doing so, he dismantled it. Now, to the early church, this was blasphemy, wrapped in intellect, a threat more dangerous than any sword or weapon, and they made sure it would not survive. By the 5th century, Christianity had become the empire's religion. The emperors Theodosius and later Theodosius II issued decrees ordering against the Christians to be destroyed wherever it was found, not hidden, not locked away, burned. The book vanished. Every copy was hunted and erased. What remains today are just mere fragments, quotes, and preserved by Christian, apologists who wrote kind of rebuttals. Ironically, the only reason we know some of this is because his enemies couldn't stop actually talking about him. He became a ghost in history, proof that the church wasn't just suppressing mystical gospels, but intellectual dissent. So basically, Porphyry's story is terrifying, not because his book was evil, but because it was effective. The church feared logic, and logic logic doesn't burn so easily. The Index of Forbidden Books. This is the Church's war on readings. For more than 4 centuries, the Catholic Church maintained a secret weapon against dangerous ideas, a blacklist known as the Index Liborium Prohibitorium, or the Index of Forbidden Books, that's easier to say. Starting in 1559 under Pope Paul IV, it named every author, every text, and every translation that Catholics were forbidden to read, own, or even print. At first, it was meant to fight, hearsay, to silence, Protestant reformers like Martin Luther, but it soon became something darker, a centuries-long censorship machine controlling what the world could know. The Index banned books that questions, church's authority, scientific discoveries that challenged theology, and even translations of the Bible not approved by the Vatican. It included works of Galileo, Copernicus, Voltaire, and dozens of theologians whose only crime was asking questions too loudly. Owning one of these banned books could cost you your livelihood or even your life. Priests inspected printing presses, libraries were forced to censor shelves, and books were burned in public squares as the faithful watched. Entire generations grew up believing that knowledge itself was sinful, and the irony, well, some of the most important advances in science and philosophy came from the very works the Index tried to erase. The Index wasn't officially abolished until 1966, almost 400 years after it began, but by then, damage was done, The world had learned that even the written word could be seen as a threat to power. I mean, it's chilling to think that the same institution that once preserved ancient manuscripts also destroyed them, basically deciding who was allowed to read and who wasn't even allowed to know. The Forbidden Bible, this is the Council of Toulouse and the War on Scripture. The year was 1229. In southern France, the Catholic Church was kind of waging a brutal campaign against the Cathars, a Christian sect that dared to believe people didn't need priests to find God. Now, the Cathars read the Bible for themselves in their own language and believed that the Church had twisted Scripture for control. That independence terrified the Vatican, of course, so the Church struck back not just with, armies, but with censorship. At the council, basically bishops issued a decree forbidding anyone outside of the clergy from owning or reading the Bible in their native tongue. Only Latin copies read by priests were permitted. Every kind of Bible was to be confiscated and destroyed. Now, to the Church, this was a safeguard against hearsay. Now, to ordinary believers, it was spiritual suffocation. I mean, the Word of God was locked behind a wall of Latin controlled by men in robes. This wasn't an isolated incident. Across medieval Europe, anyone caught translating or distributing the Bible kind of risked imprisonment or execution. The English scholar John Wycliffe translated the Bible into English in the 1300s, and after his passing, the Church dug up his body, burned it, and scattered his ashes into the river. That's so dramatic. A century later, William Tyndale dared to print another English Bible. For that, he was basically burned alive. His final words were, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." The Church believed that keeping Scripture in Latin protected truth, but what it really protected was power, because the moment people could read the Bible themselves, they could actually just start asking questions, and questions are what the Church feared the most. It would take centuries of rebellion, translation, and, a lot of blood before the Bible became freely available to the people. So across history, one pattern repeats itself. When knowledge threatens power, power fights back. Each burned page, each buried scroll, each silenced voice reminds us that history isn't just written by the victors, it's erased by them also. And sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is simply a book.
Number 5, St. Clair's fingernails and her hair. Now, some people say that fingernails and hair continue to grow after the body passes away. This is commonly repeated, but actually not true, because rather it's the skin around the fingernails retracting that gives the illusion that the fingernails are still growing. I thought I would just toss in a totally unrelated fun fact you can use at a party. These fingernails aren't growing at all, because they're not attached to anybody, and they're kept in a glass box alongside some of St. Clair's wonderful curls, like the world's worst and possibly stinkiest time capsule. Now, St. Clair was often overshadowed by her more famous mentor, Francis of Assisi, but St. Clair was her own woman, accomplished in her own right. She founded her own order of nuns, the Poor Clares. Inspired by Francis's teachings when she was a teenager, she renounced the world and founded an order based on the ideals of extreme poverty and contemplation. I should probably look into this order, because being extremely broke and contemplating being extremely broke is about 99% of what I do. The order spread popularity, and houses of Poor Clares were established far away from her home convent in Assisi. Now, it's said that part of what made St. Clair's decision to give up the worldly life so inspiring was that not only was she blessed to be born into a family of great wealth, but oh va-va-voom, St. Clair was a real stunner. Now, you know, the depictions we have to work with may not look like much, but they called her the first Jenner for her luscious lips and flowing locks. As proof of her devotion, Frances trimmed her beautiful extravagant hair as a physical manifestation of rejecting her former vain existence. As you can see, I'm not quite there yet. I'm still quite happy with my vain, disgusting hair. Now, someone down the line managed to get a hold of St. Clair's hair and fingernails. Maybe they were just sweeping the barber room floor. These treasures, for lack of a better word, were kept and encased in a reliquary at the basilica named in her honor. This also contains a rock crystal flask with her fingernails. Really not sure why anyone felt they needed to keep that. I'm not sure how holy these are, but hey, I'm not a saint or a bishop or a pope or any of that stuff. I'm just a YouTuber and I'm barely that even. But if you want to hear more of me narrating some of these strange and peculiar parts of the big globe we share, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. We got a little something for everyone. So make sure you click on through, like this video, subscribe, and hit that little bell, and we can keep on bringing you screams every single day, twice a day, and then some. But do that at the end of this video, okay? We got way more weird Catholic relics coming up for you. Number 4, papal hearts. You know, they say some people wear their hearts on their sleeves, and some people collect 22 hearts in marble urns inside a beautiful reliquary. We all have our hobbies. We all collect things. Just make sure those hearts are still in their original packaging, otherwise, you know, they're totally worthless. Well, these aren't just regular old hearts. These are the hearts of 22 former popes. Obviously they're former popes if their hearts are, obviously. At the Church of Santi Vincenzo e Anastasio a Trivia. Oof, that's a mouthful, we're not saying that again. You can find the sealed hearts of 22 popes in marble urns for all to appreciate. The popes are listed to the left of the altar, with the oldest coming in all the way from the 15th century with Sixtus V to the fresh and still beating heart of Leo XIII in 1903. Now, this custom of separating a pope's organs from the corpse sounds a bit strange, or a bit Egyptian, like they might mummify them. And then this process was called praecordia, and was done to prevent decay while funeral arrangements were made, and just to test a little bit if they were worried the Pope was going to reanimate. The tradition started up in the 14th century when it was established that when a Pope passed away, they would be mourned for 9 days. 9 days, with suffrage massages being said each day. They borrowed this little schedule from the Byzantines, who observed deaths of their emperors in a very similar manner. Really taking a while off. They took a whole pay period to mourn the loss, and then you dry those tears right up, get back to work. Now, this was all the rage for popes of yesteryear, very trendy, very in fashion. But Pope Pius X in 1914 had a change of heart when he expressly forbade it in his burial and will. He said, "Don't do any of that weird stuff to me." Those were his exact words, if you can believe it. Now, since then, his successors have all agreed and have all done the same. But who's to say? I feel this could be coming back in fashion. Pope Francis, how you feeling? You gotta listen to your heart on this one. Number 3, the Holy Souls of Purgatory. Purgatory, in Catholic belief, is kind of like a giant waiting room while the upper management figures out just where exactly they're going to find a good spot that's best for you. Well, that's simplifying it a bit, obviously. The soul is thought to be stranded in purgatory until it atones for its earthly sins, but you can hurry the process up just a little bit if your loved ones back on earth are praying for you. In the back of the Chiesa del Sacro Cuore del Suffragio del Piccolo Museo del Purgatorio, or Museum of the Holy Souls in Purgatory, holds a collection of relics that have been singed by the hands of the souls of those trapped in purgatory. These burned handprints are believed to be the souls trying to communicate that their loved ones need to pray harder. I don't know about you, but I would definitely start praying real hard if burned handprints started showing up in my books, but I would be praying for an exorcist, more likely. Now, this is kind of interesting, and I didn't even know this. Purgatory isn't even mentioned directly in the Bible, but the concept of purgatory dates back to the 11th century. This notion that trapped souls needed to be freed came from a story told to the Abbot Odilo of Cluny by a monk returning from the Holy Land. He told this story about how this ship had been wrecked, that he'd been cast ashore on a mysterious island, and a hermit who lived on the island related his own story of a chasm from which screams of trapped souls and demonic flames rose and ravaged. He told of how the demons would complain about losing souls when your loved ones would pray for their behalf. So November 2nd was established as All Souls Day. Everybody, all the souls. Where it was believed that prayers by the living could help get all of those trapped dead in purgatory loose. You know, it's kind of like that one episode of The Simpsons where the town comes together to get Bart out of the well. It's a similar enough concept, you know. They sang a song, you pray, souls get out, Bart gets out, pretty much one and the same. This particular collection of burned relics in particular, though, was collected when Victor Jouet, the missionary behind the collection, experienced a fire that burned part of the original suffragio, leaving behind a scorched image of a face that he believed was a trapped soul. Now, again, just me personally, but if I saw a face burned into one of my possessions, I would move entirely, call an exorcist, be putting salt circles around my feet for the rest of my life, but I appreciate what he did too. Number 2, the Santa Maria della Concesione crypts. Whew, my Italian is not as good as it should be. Inside the Santa Maria della Concesione crypts, as many as 4,000 friars lie here. Well, lie is probably the wrong word, as they hang here is probably a more accurate description, as these 4,000 bodies are hanging from the rafters, decorating the space of every inch of the church. Now, it might seem a bit grim or beautiful, depending on your twisted point of view. We're a scary channel, I ain't gonna judge you. There's a certain chic to it. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have to spend a few hundred a month on keeping air fresheners and incense just running all the time there. Now, you might reasonably be wondering, hey, why do they hang bones from the wall like they're throwing a Halloween party and no one went to the store to get actual decorations and they had to make do with what they had? Well, they're not just festive. The practice dates back from the 16th century when the Capuchin friars, not named after the monkey but because of the hoods they wore, left the friary of St. Bonaventure to come live at Santa Maria della Concesione. They were ordered by the Pope's brother at the time to bring the remains of deceased friars with them to their new home so that all the Capuchins could lie together. With a huge amount of bodies on their hands, the brothers decided to get a little fun with it and decorate the walls of the crypts with their bones as a way of reminding them that death comes for all of them. Surely there's a slightly easier way to remind you of the ever-present mortality that hangs over us than literally hanging a bunch of pelvises to the buttresses, but what do I know? A plaque in the crypt reads, "What you are now, we once were. What we are now, you shall be." Which is grim. No way around it. The crypt contains a little bit of everything inside you. Crypt of skulls, lovely load of leg bones, and the star of the show is definitely the crypt of pelvises. Oh, make sure you get a photo in there. Make sure you grab a fridge magnet from the Pelvis Room gift shop. And number 1, St. John the Baptist's many heads. They say 2 heads are better than 1, which might be proof of what a great man St. John the Baptist is, because no one can seem to agree how many heads the guy actually had. The saint's head was supposedly brought back from Constantinople in 1206 by the crusader Roland Doe, but it seems this happened more than a few times, since 3 different shrines across the globe all claim to have the original head of St. John the Baptist, and no one's able to clear this up anytime soon. St. John was a forerunner of Jesus Christ, and the New Testament says that John was beheaded by Herod around 28 CE as a punishment for criticizing his recent divorce. Yeesh. Paintings of the beheading depicted on a silver platter, which is a nice way to get a severed head, I think. I don't know if I ever want a head delivered to me, but if I had to, I would want it on a silver platter. According to the legend, there really was a silver platter his head was delivered on that made its way to Constantinople or Istanbul, but was sold by the Crusaders in order to pay for his travels back. John's head was on display in the Amiens Cathedral up until the French Revolution, where they confiscated all church treasures, and it would eventually return home in 1816, then going all the way back to Rome from Greek monks who brought it to a shrine decorated with beautiful stained glass, one panel depicting the head on a silver platter. You think you wouldn't want to remember that? Well, here's where the trouble comes in. A German museum in Munich also takes great pride in having St. John's head. The Munich Residence Museum contains a bunch of other holy relics, but their most prized is the alleged St. John's head, although no one really knows how it got there. This skull is wrapped in cloth and heavily interred with gems. Now, 2 would be impressive, but St. John's got a crowd worth of heads because he's got 3. His last head can be found in Damascus, Syria in the Umayyad Mosque, one of the oldest and largest mosques in the world. This relic, also not exposed, wrapped in a cloth, and is currently located in a shrine dedicated to the saint. So will the real John the Baptist please stand up? Or do all 3 of these heads actually really belong to him, and he had to be beheaded 3 times for it to take? You know what, don't answer that. I'm not sure if that's something I really want to know. Number 5, Oliver Plunkett's head. Now, in the other 2 videos, we talked about the head of St. Catherine of Siena, and we also talked about St. John the Baptist and how many heads he may or may not have had scattered across the world. And I'm not one to break tradition, so I thought for part 3 I would include a 3rd holy saintly severed head, this time belonging to Oliver Plunkett. A notable difference between the 2 other severed heads is that this one is probably the most disgusting one we've included on these lists. I know these are all holy relics, but let me just say, out of context, this is absolutely horrifying and looks like it's straight out of a grindhouse horror movie that you find in a dirty basket somewhere. Oliver Plunkett, before becoming a head, was an Irish Catholic archbishop who was a victim of the Popish plot. Now, if you're not up to date on your Catholicism, that's a whole other video worth of explaining. I don't know much about the Popish plot. I'm not the guy to do that for you. But the short version is that it was a conspiracy falsely alleging that there was a plot against the Protestant king Charles II. Oliver Plunkett happened to end up on the receiving end of something really bad. Namely, he was executed, which is pretty bad. But they really went out of their way to destroy Oliver Plunkett, his public image, his body. They called his praising of the Roman Catholic Church high treason, and his punishment was a slow and arduous death. He was hung, drawn, and finally quartered. And just in case there were any odds of him pulling through on a miraculous recovery, as a final effort, they yeeted his head into a fire, where it was rescued by a friend of Plunkett. I'd like to think I would do that for my friends. Well, after being recovered, the head was rescued and stored hidden away in a nunnery, eventually brought to Ireland in 1995, where he's now kept on display in the National Shrine to the Saint. He was canonized for his troubles, and he is the first new Irish saint in about 700 years. It's high time for some new blood, I think. So, you can go, you can pay your respects to him, and maybe offer him some skin cream, because that skin's looking a little dry. And if you're looking for more creepy videos on weird relics or all sorts of strange things, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. If there's something scary, the odds are pretty good we've got a video or 2 on it. And if you haven't already, subscribe, hit that bell for more videos every single day. But do that at the end of this video, okay? We got way more weird Catholic relics coming up for you. Number 4, St. Teresa's hand. Now, if you've watched our other videos on this subject, then no doubt you're already very familiar with the practice of making remnants of saints into relics. Now, something that's directly from a saint is called a first-class relic. That means it's something that came off of their body, you know? Their hair, their fingernails, a vial of their fluids, or in the case of the lovely St. Teresa, her whole hand. Encased in a beautiful, ornate golden reliquary with gems all over the knuckles, and the editors are goofing off because that's just a picture of the Infinity Gauntlet from Avengers Endgame. Wait, that's what it really looks like. Yeah, it seems that Marvel Studios was more than inspired by the incorruptible St. Teresa's hand when designing the weapon that would give Thanos the power to wipe out half the universe. Throw a comparison pic of them side by side, they're almost indistinguishable. I'm not 100% certain if there's any symbolism or connection there, but I'm sure St. Teresa would love to know she was involved. She was a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all the things they do. When St. Teresa of Avila passed away, the sisters of her convent buried her with the hopes of keeping her holy body with them. 9 months later, she was exhumed, only to discover that her body was intact. She hadn't decayed at all. That's why they thought she was incorruptible. Now, I'm not sure I totally follow the logic here, but after they discovered her body was incorruptible, they took her hand off and put it into this golden Infinity Gauntlet thing, as a way of inviting people to get closer to God through the saint's body. Now, this might not seem appealing to you, but there's a surprising demand for this relic. Near the end of the Spanish Civil War, General Francisco Franco had the hand removed from the convent and allegedly kept it close by, and if some of the wilder rumors are true, he would keep it by his pillow for good luck. You really gotta hand it to him, he was a devout follower of the faith. Today, you can find the hand in Iglesia de Nuestra Señora de la Merced in Ronda, Andalusia, and you don't even have to rip a stone out of the Vision's forehead to get a good look at this gauntlet. Number 3, the Veil of Veronica. Now, on these lists of holy relics, we've had all sorts of strange things. We've had fingernails, teeth, dried up hands. We got milk coming up later. All things that have come from the body. Well, this next one is no different. It's the Veil of Veronica, and to put it gently, it's a sweat rag that's a few thousand years old. Probably one of the most pungent odors on the planet. Imagine every gym locker room you've ever been in times 1,000. When Jesus carried the cross, bruised and beaten, there was one person among the crowds who saw fit to help him out a little. Veronica wiped Jesus' face with this rag, and miraculously his face transferred onto the rag like it was silly putty on the funny papers. Now, as an outsider, I thought this is what the Shroud of Turin was. That was the wrapping used to wrap Jesus after his death, so the thing I'm learning is that Jesus left an imprint of his face on just about any surface he touched. You give him a hug, have his face on the shoulder of your shirt for the rest of your life as a sacred artifact. Now, the Veil of Veronica is hard to nail down hard, concrete facts on. It's never been officially canonized as a relic of the church, and is only alleged to exist. It's claimed to be owned at St. Peter's in Rome, although this particular relic is not on public display anywhere. Probably for the best. Honestly don't know if I want to see a 2,000-year-old sweat stain. The ones underneath my shirts are bad enough. Now, it might sound like I'm being disparaging, referring to this relic multiple times as a sweat rag or a sweat stain, but I would like to offer this. The Latin name for the veil is sudarium. Sudarium literally translates to sweat cloth, so even the official churchly terminology for this relic acknowledges that it's just a stinky rag that has some sweat on it, but a holy stinky rag that has some sweat on it. Number 2, Mother Mary's milk. We're gonna do our best to get through this, I promise. Mother's Milk might be my favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers album, it's my favorite character on The Boys, and it might just be one of the oddest relics on a series of odd relics that's all the way to part 3. Took a lot of restraint to not put this in the first 2, but we're on part 3, so here it is now. As incredibly odd as it may sound, the Virgin Mary's milk is considered a relic of the Catholic Church. I hope they've been keeping that in the fridge, lest it spoils. Does holy milk spoil? Is everything I've said in this video profoundly heretical? There is a church called the Church of Milk Grotto, built outside Bethlehem. The history goes that the Madonna and child had taken refuge in this cave, and while she was feeding, milk spilled outwards and blessed the stone of the cave, turning it completely white. Now, the church serves as a popular shrine for women who are struggling with fertility, who hope that the lasting aura and presence of the Virgin Mary will bless them. There's a legend that goes with it. Saint Bernard, the saint, not the big dog that has his tongue hanging out, was devoted to the Mother Mary. And one day, he was praying at a statue of the Madonna, and he asked it to give him some sign, some proof that she was a mother. I guess the statue has like an odd sense of humor because it sprayed milk onto Saint Bernard. Depending on the variation of the story, either his eye or in his mouth. I saw a lot of really interesting paintings depicting this scene, and editors, I hope you're having so much fun trying to find photos for this one. I am so sorry. Truly, rest in peace your search history. In the Middle Ages, vials of the milk were sold and transported all over Europe. For what purpose, I could not tell you. These days, the Church of Milk Grotto sells a limestone powder made from the stone walls of the grotto, meant to be dissolved in a drink and consumed. Kinda like Crystal Light, but it's holy milk. Probably heals all that ails, and it's a good source of calcium, perhaps. And number 1, the Holy Prepuce. This is gonna be the one that takes the channel down. You have no idea the restraint it's taken me to only be bringing this up now in part 3 of strange relics. This is probably the strangest relic of them all. We'll do our best to discuss this with reverence and also somehow figure out how to stay within content guidelines. Editors, best of luck. When Jesus was born, on his 8th day, a small piece of his skin was removed in a traditional ritual performed on Jewish men when they're born. Okay? Are you sort of following along with what I'm saying here? This particular part of the body that I can't quite mention that was removed at birth was an immensely holy relic to the Catholic Church called the Holy Prepuce. Now, the very bizarre part regarding the history of the Holy Prepuce isn't just that it exists at all, it's how much trouble one bit of skin would cause. You see, the prepuce first pops up in the year 800, when Charlemagne gave it to Pope Leo III on December 25th, making it one of the oddest Christmas gifts ever given in human history. From here, it stayed until 1527. Now, when Rome was sacked, a German soldier stole the prepuce and tried to keep it for himself until it was eventually recovered again and became the centerpiece of the village of Calcutta, where it was seen as the most exciting thing to happen in a while. It was like a celebrity showed up to the village. It was this great, big, important deal. They had a part of the body of the Savior. All manner of miracles were reported to have been the result of the Holy Prepuce. However, several other churches, villages, priests all claimed that they had the true Holy Prepuce, and any other ones you might have heard of out there were false. This problem became rampant, and in the early 1900s, the church wanted to wash their hands of the Holy Prepuce entirely and outright forbade any discussion of it in church matters. It was actually an excommunicable offense to so much as bring up the prepuce, meaning this video is pure heresy. In 1983, the prepuce was stolen from the church in Calcutta. Where is it now? Where did it go? Absolutely no one knows. No one's fessed up. You know, if you took it, I think now's a good time to just admit you did it. But if they're ever looking for a plot line for a third National Treasure movie, I have an absolutely amazing idea for something Nicolas Cage could steal.
The Exorcism of Anneliese, Michelle. Now imagine the sound of someone growing in 6 different voices, all coming from the same young woman. That's exactly what priests and witnesses reported hearing during the exorcisms of Anneliese, Michelle, which is one of the most disturbing cases the Catholic Church has ever tried to silence. Anneliese was a bright, deeply religious 23-year-old student from Germany. Now she wasn't just any girl. She was kind, devout, and dreamed of becoming a teacher, but her life spiraled into something unimaginable after she began suffering from seizures at the age of 16. Doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, which is a condition that can cause hallucinations. But as the years went on, her family and even her doctors started to notice things that just couldn't be explained by medicine. Now, Anneliese began hearing voices that told her she was damned, and she claimed to see demonic faces everywhere she looked. Crosses made her recoil in pain. She couldn't even enter a church. She screamed when holy water touched her skin, and her parents described seeing her contort her body in impossible ways and bark like an animal for hours. When priests were called in, they claimed she spoke fluent Latin, a language she had never studied, and identified herself as 6 different entities: Lucifer, Judas, Iscariot, Nero, Cain, a really bad guy who I can't talk about, and a disgraced priest named Fleischmann. Now, over 10 months, 2 priests performed 67 separate exorcisms, some lasting up to 4 hours as Anneliese's body kind of withered away to less than 70 pounds. By the time she passed away in 1976, her knees were shattered from kneeling in prayer for so long. Her last words were heartbreaking. She whispered to her mother, "Mother, I'm afraid." Now, the church quietly buried the case, but tapes of her exorcisms with guttural growls, snarling laughter, and overlapping demonic voices leaked years later, terrifying anyone who heard them. The church still refuses to acknowledge her possession, labeling it a medical failure. But many priests who actually saw her firsthand swore there was something far darker than epilepsy inside her. The Exorcism of Roland Doe. Now, this is the true Exorcist. Now, if you've ever seen The Exorcist, you know how terrifying that film is. But what if I told you the real story behind it? It's even worse, and the church has kept most of it hidden. Well, in 1949, a 14-year-old boy known under the pseudonym Roland Doe, sometimes Robbie, began experiencing very bizarre, violent phenomena in Maryland. It started small scratching noises inside his bedroom walls, objects flying, off shelves, and his mattress began shaking violently at night. Then, very strange words began appearing on his skin, scratches that seemed to be written from the inside out. His family, desperate for answers, first sought help, from their Lutheran pastor, who quickly realized this was beyond his power. He turned to the Catholic Church. Multiple priests reported that Roland's behavior would shift instantly. One moment he was calm and polite, the next his eyes would roll back. His voice deepened beyond recognition, and his body would convulse with superhuman strength. During one exorcism, witnesses claimed the boy broke free from his restraints, ripped a spring from the bed, and slashed a priest's arm from shoulder to wrist. On another occasion, the word hello appeared carved into his stomach. It wasn't written by anyone in the room, it just formed itself as priests looked on, in horror. The boy's family was relocated multiple times to, continue this ritual, eventually ending up at a Jesuit hospital in St. Louis. Over a month of nightly exorcisms, priests recorded that Roland levitated, spoke in Latin, and growled in voices that didn't belong to him. The final final exorcism ended with him screaming the words, "Satan, I am Saint Michael. You will leave this boy now." Then, according to witnesses, a loud kind of sound echoed through the room. Roland fell back onto the bed unconscious, and when he woke up, he whispered, "It's over." So the Catholic Church sealed the official records, but priests later admitted that several exorcists involved refused to speak of what they saw ever again, and the boy's real identity, still protected today, remains, one of the most guarded secrets in modern exorcism history. The Smurl haunting. If you think demons only attach to people, think again. The Smurl family learned that evil can actually infest an entire home. Now, in the quiet suburb of West Pittston, Pennsylvania, Jack and Janet Smurl moved into what they thought was their dream house in the late 1970s, but within weeks, things turned nightmarish. The smell of rotting flesh would fill the air, walls kind of with brown ooze, and an unseen force slammed their dog into a wall so hard it left a dent. At night, the family reported hearing growls, footsteps, and whispering voices calling their names. Now, the demon targeted everyone differently. It actually essayed Janet while she slept, apparently. It hurled Jack across the room in front of witnesses. Their daughters were terrorized by shadowy figures that hovered over their beds. And when the family called the church, priests initially dismissed them until famed demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren got involved. Lorraine later claimed she saw a dark human-shaped mass crawl up the wall and vanish into the ceiling. The Warrens described the entity as, inhuman, not a ghost, but a demon feeding on the family's suffering. Multiple exorcisms were performed, each one making the activity worse. Neighbors reported hearing screams and moans coming from the house when no one was actually inside. The Smurls even moved, but the demons followed them. It wasn't until the late 1980s that the church performed a final secret exorcism. Afterward, the attacks stopped abruptly. The church publicly denied involvement, but the Warrens claimed the Vatican sent priests under orders of complete confidentiality. To this day, the Smurl haunting remains one of the most chilling and controversial possession cases the church refuses to comment on. The Enfield poltergeist. Now, few cases in history have more witnesses, photos, and evidence, and yet the church still won't touch it. In 1977, single mother Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children began to experience a series of escalating paranormal events in their modest council house in Enfield, London. It began when Peggy's daughters heard knocking on the walls of their shared bedroom. Furniture slid across the floor on its own, toys flew through the air, and 11-year-old Janet was the center of it all. She began actually levitating in front of witnesses. British police officers, journalists, and psychic researchers all saw very unexplainable things firsthand. Janet would speak in a voice that was clearly not her own, deep, a male kind of voice, claiming to be the spirit of a man named Bill Wilkins. Now, he had passed away in the house years before that, but soon the activity grew a lot darker. Janet was seen being thrown from her bed by invisible hands, twisted in midair, and dragged across the room. Investigators reported extreme temperature drops and even bite marks that appeared out of nowhere. The local priest refused to continue visiting after one encounter left him violently ill. The church worried about public backlash and accusations of hysteria, so they declined to perform an exorcism. Instead, it actually distanced itself from the family. But recordings from the investigation, over 200 hours worth, still exist. They actually contained Janet's horrifying possession voice and the sound of furniture moving when no one was actually near it. Skeptics still debate whether the Enfield poltergeist was real or staged, but when dozens of independent witnesses, police, reporters, and neighbors, they all describe the same impossible things, it's very hard to call it fake at that point. The possession of David Glatzel and the devil made me do it case. Now, this story is one of the few cases where demonic possession became a legal defense in court, and the church wanted nothing to do with it. In 1980, 11-year-old David Glatzel began seeing a mysterious shadowy figure with hooves and glowing eyes. He said it threatened to steal his soul. Within days, he was having violent fits, growling, and speaking in voices that weren't his. The family called Ed and Lorraine Warren, who said they found clear signs of demonic possession. Now, over several days, they assisted priests in performing multiple exorcisms. During one of them, a witness claimed they saw a black mist rise from David's body and move towards his sister's boyfriend, Arne Cheyenne Johnson. Arnie allegedly shouted, "Take me instead." Weeks later, Arnie began acting strangely, moody, distant, aggressive, and on February 16th, 1981, he brutally hurt his landlord to unaliving him, claiming he didn't remember doing it. Now, during the trial, his defense attorney argued that, Arnie had been possessed when he committed this crime. It became known worldwide as the devil made me do it case. Now, the church distanced itself completely, refusing to confirm or deny its role in David's exorcism, but witnesses, including the Warrens and multiple family members, Templars insisted they saw supernatural forces at work. Arnie served just 5 years in prison for far less, that was far less expected, and later he actually said he believed something truly evil had taken over him. The Vatican never commented on the case, and the original exorcism tapes have never been released. Some claim they, locked away in a church archives evidence, and some also claim that, they just don't want the world to hear it.
Number 5, a time machine. Among the many conspiracies about what goods are hidden inside the Vatican's secret archives, one of the more popular and reoccurring ones is that the Vatican has access to wondrous technology hidden away from the rest of the world, from ancient civilizations, stuff like that. One leading theory is that among these devices is something called the Chronovisor, an alleged time machine of sorts that allows the user to peer inside and see whatever time period in history or forwards they desire, like a little time camera. Doctor Who would love it. One Italian monk, one Pellegrino Ernetti, claimed that he developed the Chronovisor at some point during the 1950s with a team of 12 esteemed scientists who all wished to remain anonymous in the process. I would put my name on that if I invented time travel, personally. I'd want people to know. The Chronovisor is described as consisting of antennas and an unknown metal that's really good at looking through time, a little knob for tuning to a particular time and place, and a screen and recording device. Ernetti described that he and his team used this machine to view speeches by Mussolini and Napoleon, scenes from ancient Rome, and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, which they allegedly tried to take a photo of. Now obviously no one's seen the Chronovisor. If such a device was to exist, it would naturally be pretty secretive. An Italian magazine in the 1970s claims that they found that image of Christ's crucifixion, the photo that was taken through time, only to discover that it was actually just a postcard. So this one's a bit up in the air. Let me know if you think this is real, but also, you know what? Let me know what time period you would want to take a picture of, if you could see that up close. And if you're looking for way more scary content, my friends, you already know Top 5 Scary is the place to be. We've got everything scary under the sun. Cryptids, conspiracies, true crime, fake crime, aliens, UFOs, just about anything freaky you can think of. So click on through, subscribe, stay scared, and don't miss a single thing. But keep watching this video too, okay? We worked hard on it. Number 4, the 3 secrets of Fatima. Over 100 years ago, 3 young people in Portugal from the town of Fatima claimed that they were visited by the Virgin Mary herself in a vision, and the Madonna shared with them wondrous prophecies and visions onto them. These visions, allegedly, were the Second World War, the rise and fall of communism, and the death of a pope. And these were referred to as the 3 secrets of Fatima. Very cool prophecy stuff. Now, story goes that the Madonna would visit these 3 shepherds every 6 months on the 13th day of each month on the dot. She was very punctual. Influenza would end up claiming the lives of 2 of these prophets, leaving only one to share messages with the world, and then only briefly too. Conspiracies and conspiracists state that the things the Virgin Mary told the shepherds weren't quite reported on accurately, and in truth, the church knows the real secrets that were bestowed upon the Fatimans, and that these were way too dangerous to be let out and had to be suppressed and controlled for fear of civil unrest, possibly pertaining to things that could damage the church's good reputation or change the nature of society as a whole. Maybe the answer as to whether or not that dress was white and black or gold and blue the whole time. An alternate conspiracy is that there were more secrets that the church knows about but refuses to share. Maybe 4 secrets of Fatima. That makes sense. They're called the secrets of Fatima, not the tell everybody's of Fatima. You want my theory? My conspiracy? Virgin Mary told those shepherds of Fatima the recipe for KFC and Coke, and the Vatican realized quickly that information is just too sensitive. That's gotta stay under wraps. Number 3, proof of aliens. Well, we already talked a little bit about some of the incredible technology that could be inside this archive. And it's thought that the Vatican has all sorts of incredible information hidden away in its vaults that humanity, we're just not ready to know about. We're not grown up enough. One of the other leading ones is that theorists speculate that inside those secret archives is indisputable hard evidence of extraterrestrial life, that they're harboring alien skulls and remnants of amazing technology, I guess on borrow from Area 51's collection it's traveling. So the story goes that in the late 1960s, during renovations of the Vatican's archives, excavators uncovered alien skulls beneath the Vatican archives, and somewhere the predator is so upset that he lost those. Is it possible that they worried that if proof of extraterrestrial life got out into the wild, it would discredit belief out there? It wouldn't be the first time. Galileo was famously locked up for his wild beliefs about the celestial bodies that would turn out to be fairly true. So would aliens be any different, really a different story? A Russian engineer named Genrikh Maricha Ludwig was an esteemed scholar who in the 1920s was invited to the secret archives to study, a very prestigious position offered to less than 1,000 scholars a year. According to him, while there, he uncovered documentations that discussed the influence of aliens on civilizations like the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Mesopotamians. Ludwig found records of use of atomic weaponry predating the Manhattan Project, suggesting that this hyper-advanced technology had been in use for years, and humanity's leaps and progress were all reverse engineered from our visitors. Maybe the pyramids really were aliens. Would certainly be something if that ever came out. I hope in our lifetime, I hope we get to see some aliens, and I hope we get to see an alien elected pope someday. Personally. Number 2, proof Jesus never existed. Or did. Now, among the things that you would think the Vatican would really want to keep hidden and on the DL would be proof that the Lord and Savior did not exist. This is another popular conspiracy theory emanating about the Vatican, that one of the things they're trying to cover up is some alleged document that insists Jesus as we know him wasn't quite real or wasn't as reported accurately. That would make sense. If I was the Pope, that would be the number one thing I would want to keep under wraps, right? That would probably destroy the church overnight if that ever came out. Now, on the inverse of this theory is a similar theory, totally different direction though, stating that the Vatican secret archives contains indisputable proof that Jesus did exist, including correspondences between St. Paul and Emperor Nero, history's favorite bad boy, contemporary paintings and depictions of the man, which would be pretty groundbreaking. You'd wonder though, if they have that, why would they keep that secret? I would leak that one. Now, if you believe this conspiracy and you can carry on with it, it does get a little wild. One author, Michael Bagnet, claims that the correspondences inside the archives, they prove Jesus did exist, but here's a crazy twist. He didn't die on the cross, as we all know, but rather there was a very complicated scheme with Pontius Pilate to secretly fake Jesus' death to appease the citizens of Rome. Sounds a little bit more like the plotline to a Dan Brown novel. It's a little fantastical, and if true, would probably be the greatest conspiracy theory in human history, and maybe humanity's most tightly guarded secrets if there's any weight to it. So definitely, if they knew that, they would probably keep that under wraps, keep that in a drawer, locked up tight, not let anybody see that. Number 1, the Illuminati. Maybe this is one of the most widespread conspiratorial beliefs, maybe one of the oldest conspiracy theories out there, really, is that the Illuminati, the centuries-old secret society that once started in Bavaria, would eventually grow into an organization capable of challenging the church and overtaking it. And if you believe the conspiracies, it's clandestinely pulling the strings behind everything, controlling the world from the shadows, inserting key members of its order into the highest levels of government, religion, the Disney Corporation, the rap industry, and also including their symbols hidden in everything. That one, I guess, just for fun, just to, flex. May I just say though, if the Illuminati are real and controlling things, they have got to be the least kept secret order, imaginable, since, I'm talking about them. Well, the conspiracy goes that the Vatican is closely tied with the Illuminati, with some believing that cardinals and the papacy are all tied to Illuminati interests, and that the secret archives contain bountiful proof of this: memos, meetings, plans for world domination, etc. The Vatican's archives date back centuries, nearly 1,000 years worth of old papers, with some documents containing secrets of the Knights Templar, who are thought to be the originators of Freemasonry, the group that would become tied with the Illuminati. That's who the Illuminati was based on. Surely some of those Knight Templar meeting minutes would be particularly illuminating, if you'll pardon that absolutely horrible pun. Of all the ones on this list, I think this one is the most outright likely, since we know the Illuminati did stem from the Freemasons, and we know that there was a real Illuminati. That's an indisputable fact. And we know the Knights Templar, we know all of these groups did exist. Number 5. Maricha Kurichi. Now, when demonic possession is the leading symptom, you don't go to WebMD, you call the cloth, and you send a man with a fancy little black case and a crucifix to come excise the demons from your soul and your mortal body. That's basic stuff. But what happens when demonic possession occurs to someone inside the church? You don't hear about that a lot. What's the protocol? Well, in the case of Maricha Kurichi, that is exactly what happened. This young woman was a member of the convent living in Romania sometime in the 20th century, when she became the unwilling host to a hostile demon that had moved in and paid first and last for rent inside her body. She believed that not only was she possessed by a demon, but that she was being spoken to directly. The devil was using her head as a landline, and she was being whispered demonic thoughts and threats all hours of the day. I can imagine that would be so exhausting. I get tired of my own thoughts. Can't imagine having to hear Satan's every little thought too. Now, initially she was being treated for possible schizophrenia, but when that didn't take care of the problem, the church sent an agent in to clear out the demonic presence. She was offered a little bit of holy water to drink, but gagged it up and was then restrained to be exorcised. Now, in my opinion, I feel like that's a bad test. I can't imagine holy water is really that refreshing. I wouldn't know, never had it. Maybe it's like San Pellegrino. I don't know. Anyway, she was bound to a cross and was gagged with a wet cloth soaked in holy water and subjected to round-the-clock exorcising over the course of 3 days. Now, she wasn't fed during this time, nor were any of her medical needs tended to, and shockingly, Maricha would pass from her conditions, leaving this earth a free soul, if for nothing else. Now, the priest involved in the exorcism would later undergo investigation, and he would insist that he was innocent from his involvement with Maricha's death, as he was simply trying to cure her the way God intended, and her death was an unfortunate incident as a result of the process. Yeah, sure, but isn't the point of an exorcism to, get the ghosts and demons out there so the host can go on living? In the end, the courts ruled that Maricha's death was due to adrenaline injections when she was taken into hospital care. And if you're looking for way more stories of exorcism, demons, cryptids, true crime, fake crime, just about all that scary stuff, we've got all of that and then some. Hit the bell, subscribe, and don't miss a scream, but do that after the end of this video, okay? We got way more exorcisms and demons coming up for you.
Number 4. The Exorcisms of John Paul II. Being the Pope is not an easy gig. I mean, I'm assuming it isn't. You're always having to wear funny hats while living in a gigantic palace. You're having to pray for the people of the world constantly, and as someone who is traditionally believed to be God's personal representative on earth, and due to papal infallibility, is believed by many Catholics to be incapable of making mistakes. In addition to all this, the Pope has to find time to drag race his Pope-mobile and get poked with a stick by his men to make sure that he is still alive. As if that weren't enough, he also has to perform exorcisms from time to time. One of the popes with the most direct battles with the devil under his belt is St. John Paul II. When John Paul II wasn't busy ignoring church scandals and preaching that divorced women who remarried would go to hell, he was also known for doing battle with Satan. He performed his first exorcism as Pope on March 27, 1982, when a bishop brought forward a young woman named Francesca Fabrizi, hoping that the Pope could assist her in her issues. Upon seeing the Pope, she fell to the ground and started writhing uncontrollably while sobbing. The Pope tried to comfort her, but she didn't calm down until he said, quote, "Tomorrow, I will say a mass for you." This apparently worked and she was freed, but dude, you're the Pope. Why wait until tomorrow to help? Anyways, Francesca later visited the Pope a few years later with her husband and children to show how much better she was doing. It apparently prompted John Paul to say, quote, "I've never seen anything like this before. It was a biblical scene." In the year 2000, John Paul performed another exorcism in St. Peter's Square when a woman was brought into the square and immediately began yelling and lunging at the Pope, requiring 10 people to hold her down as she drooled and yelled blasphemies. The Pope finished his weekly address and requested to meet the young woman. At the sight of him, her eyes rolled back and she started screaming to be left alone. Old JP performed the exorcism, blessing her several times, but this case needed follow-up from Father Gabriel Amorth, the Vatican's chief exorcist, and the inspiration for the soon-to-be-released horror film, The Pope's Exorcist. I guess the moral is, if you're a demon who doesn't want to be exorcised, maybe don't go to the Vatican.
Now, number 3, Exorcism TV. Now, while exorcisms have served as the inspiration for more than a few Hollywood movies about ghost hunters, it's rare that us, the general plebes and public, ever get a look behind the curtain and get to see what a real exorcism is like in all its ugliness. Well, in 1991, in a controversial move by the Vatican, Reverend James Labar oversaw an exorcism of a young woman named Gina, televised for your viewing pleasure to watch while you munch on a big tub of popcorn. Reverend Labar, before performing the exorcism, was quoted as saying, "We thought it was important for people to understand that the devil does exist, and most importantly, that the church means to help." He left out that it's just a total coincidence they're filming this and all that, and it's just out of the goodness of their heart. Now, if there's a slight waft of condescension in my narration, it's because this move was not without its controversy at all. A great number of detractors, both of the church and outside of it, argued that this was sensationalizing and exploitative of the young woman, whose problems were certainly not made better by having a camera crew pressed up against her and a boom mic hovering above her head. One critic decried the whole event and the Vatican, referring to the entire process as being regressive and medieval, propping up a mental patient for the entertainment of the masses on a Sunday. Now, the kicker is the young woman was a mental patient and was undergoing treatment for her intense psychological issues and psychotic episodes, and her family had insisted that these problems stemmed from a demon instead of a mental health struggle, but that doesn't make for good TV. The exorcism went off as planned and the church declared it a success, with the Reverend being quoted as saying, "She is up and about, but not well." And the televised exorcism had nothing to do with that, I am sure. Now, if you're curious about hunting this clip down, it is available out there on YouTube, but I'll warn you, Googling Gina exorcism just pulls up results for the Real Housewives of Orange County, which honestly might be way more entertaining and more likely to contain a real demon in it, I feel. Number 2, Roland Doe. 2 in a row, me again, hey. Doing a list about notorious demons that led to the church intervening in an exorcism would be rather incomplete if we didn't include the case of Roland Doe. The exorcism so infamous that it would end up being synonymous with the word exorcism, inspiring the legendary horror movie The Exorcist. And to a lesser extent the original novel the film was based on, but we don't read books here, those are for nerds. Now, the real case was mostly just inspiration for the film, because in actuality things are pretty different. For one thing, instead of Reagan, the host in question was a boy named Roland Doe, who may never have thrown up any pea soup or twisted his head 180 degrees, but definitely had a spiritual problem. As a youngster, Doe was a socially isolated boy who didn't spend much time with anyone else in the neighborhood, instead spending most of his time with his Aunt Harriet, who was fascinated by the occult and spirit worlds. For a birthday one year, she gave onto Roland a Ouija board and taught him how to use it and taught him of all the spirit world. This would invite troubles into his life. After Aunt Harriet would pass, it wasn't long before strange things started plaguing the Doe household. Growling from out of nowhere, furniture moving. Eventually a priest was called in to investigate and deduced that Roland had become a vessel. Now, this exorcism was brutal, even by exorcism standards, which I guess is why it got made into a movie. When Roland was restrained, he managed to escape and slashed at the priest with a broken bed spring. On the boy's body, red scratch marks were spelling out Louis, so he was relocated to St. Louis to face even more exorcising. After a brutal battle by seasoned priests, Roland claimed he had a vivid dream of St. Michael battling against Lucifer for control of his soul in a divine field. Do you think he ever saw the movie afterwards, though?
Number 1. This loser. In Germany in the 1930s, a new political party came into power, stoking the country's nationalism and pandering to xenophobia against the Jewish people of the country in order to justify horrible atrocities and efforts to invade other countries, thus kicking off the Second World War. This political party was called the National Socialist Germans Worker Party, but most people refer to them as idiots. Their leader, Hitler, was an evil man who led his country into fascism, caused the extermination of more than 6 million Jewish lives, and started a war that led to between 70 to 85 million people dying. In the face of all the harm this art school reject caused, many people wonder how it is possible for one man to have been so evil. Some have theorized that he was a sociopath, and others have said that anyone is capable of such atrocities if they are given the authority and power to act against those they have prejudice against. But Others believe there was another element of a more supernatural nature at play. Some people thought that the Fuhrer was so evil because he was possessed by a demon. One of the people who thought this was the Pope. Vatican documents released in 2006 showed that the Pope of the era, the Venerable Pius XII, believed that little Dolphy was diabolically possessed. One of the requirements for an exorcism is that it is carried out in the physical presence of the afflicted party with their expressed consent. But as Pius was concerned about the mass exterminations taking place, he decided to take a literal Hail Mary approach against Dipshitler's attempts to take over the world. In the privacy of his private chambers, Pius performed a long-distance ritual of liberation of the devil on the German leader, hoping that God would expel the devil from the mustachioed twerp and bring an end to the atrocities that were being committed. Whether it be because the Pope's long-distance prayer powers weren't up to snuff, or because the evil in question was human in nature rather than demonic, the exorcism failed and the war continued, despite the Pope's hope for divine intervention.
Number 5. Benito Mussolini. The Vatican isn't just the seat of the Catholic Church. Did you know that actually the Vatican is the smallest country in the world? Despite the fact that it does exist inside Rome, inside Italy, the Vatican technically is not part of Italy, but rather its own sovereign little country. About 1,000 people live there total. But it hasn't always been this way, and the reason that it became that way is a little darker than I'm sure the church would like to admit. It was a treaty with fascist leader Benito Mussolini. In 1922, Mussolini and the National Fascist Party came to power in Italy, crushing democracy and putting up a pretty hostile dictatorship in its place. In 1929, Mussolini and the church came together to have a little meet and greet and sign a treaty, granting the church status as a private enclave, a sovereign state inside of Italy. Mussolini wouldn't bother the Vatican, and they wouldn't bother him. Mussolini even paid out a massive settlement, which the church invested and is believed to be valued at around $780 million. Alongside tax exemption and priests getting a nice salary from the Italian government. All of those benefits you can thank a fascist government for. Perhaps most illuminating, however, was a clause that protected the Vatican's dignity, meaning as part of their laws as a sovereign state, they were allowed to arrest and try anyone who criticized the people and the church. In exchange for signing this treaty, the Catholic Church publicly supported the fascist dictatorship and was recognized as Italy's official government. The Vatican's own newspaper printed shortly after the deal went down, "Italy has been given back to God and God to Italy." And they only have the support of someone who was involved in hundreds of thousands of deaths to thank. And if you're looking for way more strange, true things out of history, conspiracies about the Catholic Church, cryptids, aliens, and all sorts of freaky business, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. So click on through, hit subscribe, please make sure to hit that bell so you get everything and do not miss a single scream. But you do that at the end of this video, okay? We got way more Catholic Church secrets coming up. Number 4, the treacherous Pope Boniface. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. This idea being that none of us are truly free of sin, and we're all born into this world natural sinners. Well, some people really take that idea and really run with it. And you would be surprised how high up the Catholic Church some of these troublemakers get. That's where Pope Boniface VII comes in, one of history's most notorious popes for his incredibly unholy behavior. Pope Boniface was actually so wildly controversial that Dante Alighieri wrote in the Inferno that Pope Boniface was condemned to the 8th circle of hell where the frauds were kept. It's a really good window into the sort of general mindset of the population that in their books they were imagining all the ways he'd be tormented in hell. And as a quick aside, for the comment section, Dante's Inferno, is that history's first fan fiction? There's a very serious argument to be made that it is. Anyway, Boniface saw the destruction of Palestrina, a city that had already peacefully surrendered and submitted, but that wasn't good enough for the church. Palestrina had already been burned to the ground, and goofy old Pope Boniface ordered that they plow it down to the dirt and soil to ensure that absolutely nothing of the city remained standing, a real salt-of-the-earth approach. He was definitely a guy who loved his neighbors. He really loved his neighbors, in the sense that the vow of celibacy that men of the cloth have to swear to, Boniface didn't really, believe in at all. He was alleged to engage in all kinds of parties with all manner of bedroom companions, having once stated that he felt intercourse with younger people was as natural as hands rubbing together. A really, really great guy all together, and he also loved building statues of himself all the time, so he was very prideful, which that's the worst sin of them all, really. Really. Number 3. Galileo. Science and religion do have a place alongside one another in the world, I think. Now, science and religion have had a complicated history, they've never quite seen eye to eye, kind of always furrowing their brows and glaring at each other through the hallways, but one could never truly disprove wholly the existence of God through science, and I think science can illuminate and shine new light on ways to glorify religion, right? Maybe? Well, not particularly. As one could imagine, there's a great deal of difficulty the church has with science. In 1633, Galileo Galilei, the renowned astronomer, made himself an enemy of the Catholic Church and God for having the unbelievable, blasphemous, heretical viewpoint that the Earth orbits the Sun and not the other way around. Now, Galileo didn't quite have it all the way, since he did posit that the Sun is the center of the universe, and he wasn't super right about that, but hey, give the guy a little credit. He was doing all this before the TI-84, okay? He was just looking up in the sky making all these guesses. Pretty smart guy. Was doing better than most astronomers out there. Now, for this most heinous, disgusting, unbelievably sinful crime, Galileo was arrested and put on trial, where 10 cardinals sat before him passing judgment and trying to decide how best to punish this disgusting heretic, floating some fun ideas like imprisonment for life, torment, being burned at the stake. Again, this is all because Galileo suggested how the planets work, and he was mostly right about this, which is important to hammer home. Eventually, Galileo renounced his beliefs, saying he was wrong and he was getting up there in age and didn't want to spend the rest of his life suffering. So in an act of true humble forgiveness, the church instead decreed that instead of being burned or anything, Galileo be condemned to spend the rest of his days in his home, which he did until his passing. That'll teach him. Now eventually, obviously, the church kind of had to walk back some of that treatment of Galileo. In 1992, they spoke out saying that maybe he was kind of technically right about like a few things here and there, and mumbled out an apology like a schoolyard bully being forced to say sorry by the teachers. Sure, it was about 350 years too late, but I bet Galileo probably really appreciated it and would have loved to have known how vindicated by history he would have been. Number 2, the wild and wacky life of Pope Benedict IX. Over the years, there have been many controversial popes. I mean, there's a bunch on this list already. In fact, you'd probably find more popes are wrapped in controversy than you might imagine. Now, it's pointless to compare sins on any sort of moral scale as to who's the most evil or the worst pope, but it's hard to argue that few of them got up to as much chaos and trouble as Pope Benedict IX, who was one of the wackiest, most notorious popes out there. He once sold the position because he got bored of it. It's said he began his pontification when he was a young man because his wealthy family just wanted it, and that was like a thing you could do back then. If you had enough money, you could just bribe the church and ask that your son become pope. Benedict loved the lifestyle and behaved the way Joffrey Baratheon would, kind of really letting the power get to his head almost immediately. He would spend his money on women of the night, hosting lecherous, wild, erotic parties, which allegedly would have all manner of man, woman, and if the stories are to be believed, animals as well. It was not long before there were conspiracies being drawn up to assassinate the Pope, if you can believe that. Even just saying that feels weird, but they wanted to assassinate the Pope. Probably in a case of divine intervention or fate, on a feast day, his enemies snuck into St. Peter's Basilica carrying rope, ready to tangle up the Pope. But a solar eclipse scared the assassins so badly they called the whole thing off, and to be honest, I totally get it. If I was planning on disposing the Pope and the sun got blocked out, I'd assume God was furious at me. Failed coups notwithstanding, Pope Benedict's reputation did not improve much. He was attacked by an angry mob in 1045, and he was forced to flee and would be replaced by another pope, one Sylvester III. 2 months later, however, Benedict would return to take the title back. But 2 months later, he decided that he didn't really enjoy being pope anymore. It wasn't as fun, what with all the constant bombardment of hate and failed attempts on his life. So he sold it to his godfather for what amounted to nearly $30 million. Imagine buying the Pope. Imagine buying being the voice of God. Anyway, if you can believe it, like Emperor Palpatine, somehow Pope Benedict returned a third time. King Henry III of Germany had arrested Pope Sylvester III for being a false pope, and the godfather that he'd sold the throne to had given up the papacy, admitting that it was shameful and heretical for him to have ever done so in the first place. So Henry appointed a new German pope while Benedict was in hiding, and that pope mysteriously passed away 8 months later from a poisoning. which many historians suspect Benedict had his little fingers in. So Benedict came back for a third time to be the Pope, only this time no one was putting up with him. They'd been through this 2 more times, they weren't doing it again. Henry III sent troops to drag him out of the basilica. He spent his dying years in a monastery and is now remembered in history as one of the worst popes ever. And number 1, the Pazzi conspiracy. If you've garnered anything from this video that I've been telling you, I sincerely hope it's that the Pope doesn't always follow the rules. Sure, the guy interprets the will of God, he's got a direct line to talking to him, but that doesn't mean he follows every single one of his rules. Now, we've already discussed some of the wildest sins that popes have been caught up in, but let's top it all off with a full-blown assassination conspiracy revolving around the Pope ordering a hitman. No, really. In the 1470s, Pope Sixtus IV hatched a scheme to rid Florence of the Medicis, the most influential family in the country at the time, rivaling the church. The Medicis had served as the bankers for the papacy for generations, and as such were loaded. Pope Sixtus kickstarted this conflict when he changed the Medicis over as the bankers to the Pazzi family, who were more loyal to him. The Medicis didn't want to pay to help the Pope claim the town of Imola, which the Medicis themselves wanted to lord over. So with these in the way, the Pope thought that something had to be done about these meddling Medicis. So Sixtus contracted 2 assassins to carry out the plot against Lorenzo and Giuliano de' Medici during Easter Mass on Sunday, which just feels unbelievably disrespectful if you're the Pope, You can't talk in church, but you can orchestrate a political assassination. That's fine to do on Sunday, on Easter Sunday? Now, if you're sitting here listening to this and you're kind of scratching your head because you feel like all of this sounds a bit familiar, imagine you have a white hood on and you're jumping into a bale of hay, because this was a driving plotline in Assassin's Creed 2, where protagonist Ezio ends up helping out Lorenzo Medici a great deal. Yeah, no, the games were really inspired by true history, save for a few extendo blades and boss fights against the Pope, but a lot of that stuff really did happen. History is just as weird as the video games make it out to be. Now, if you remember from Assassin's Creed 2, Giuliano was fatally slain, but Lorenzo survived and rallied support of Florence in a war against the church. Lorenzo picked off conspirators and then sailed to Naples to meet King Ferdinand to discuss a peaceful solution to the bubbling war. There's a reason they called him Il Magnifico. This guy was great at strategy. In the end, the plot failed drastically because all it really did was cement people's support to Lorenzo Medici. People loved the fact that he survived an assassination. They made a medal commemorating this for him, and it brought shame to Pope Sixtus, and it inspired one of the best games Ubisoft ever put out.